For 2 months, the old woman had been preparing to die. The Gray Blight had devoured her liver. The doctors in the capital said treating her wasn't worth the cost. And then a man walked into her tavern, a man who knew how to make broth and see right through illness. But first, about him. He opens his eyes and sees a stone ceiling, a foreign body, thin, pale hands, not his hands. A stranger's memories explode in his head, a temple, an altar, the scent of incense, and 4 faces above, a swordsman in silver, a mage with a staff, an archer with icy eyes, a priestess in white. Everyone is looking down, with disdain. The swordsman unrolls a scroll and reads the verdict. SS rank healer Jeong Do Hwan is expelled from the Shining Blade for excessive enhancement of the team. The contract is terminated. And this is where the strangest part begins. He's not being expelled for weakness. He's being expelled for being too good. The sponsors asked a direct question. Why pay a swordsman if the healer dies once, and the whole squad is as good as new again? The archer adds that he devalues the achievements of the others. The priestess looks away and remains silent. And in Do Hwan's mind, 2 memories clash. One knows this temple and 2 years of raids. The other knows the smell of beef broth and 36 hours at the stove. He died there, in another world, fell asleep face down in a pot. His heart stopped, and he woke up here, in a body that had just been tossed aside like trash. He sits down. These unfamiliar muscles don't obey him well. The swordsman hands him a canvas bag. All your belongings. Do Hwan looks inside. A change of clothes, a knife, a letter of dismissal, and a bundle of oil-stained cloth. He unwraps it and freezes. Spices, a dozen little bags, ginger, pepper, salt, dried garlic, turmeric. His fingers recognize them before his mind does. The body's former owner had carried this around on raids for 2 years. Why? The new Do Hwan knows why. He slings the bag over his shoulder and heads for the exit. None of the 4 asks where he's going. None gives him money for the road. None says thank you for the 2 years he spent pulling them back from death. He pushes open the heavy doors. Light hits his face. Before him lies a harsh world. Harryon. A world of potions and licensed guilds where a healer is a pack horse. Useful, invisible. Do Hwan descends the steps and heads not north toward the capital, south. His body's memory guides him. In the south, a port. In the south, fish. In the south, salt. And the town of Phado, where outcasts are exiled and from which no one returns. He walks all day. By evening, he reaches a hill. Phado lies below. Gray roofs, winding streets, a dozen boats in the harbor. And the smell. Rotting fish, salt, and something Swedish. Wrong. Sickness. The healer's eyes see what people do not. A gray haze hangs over the town. Gray Blight, the curse of the southern coast. Children cough up black dust. Fishermen come home with gray spots on their hands. The potions don't work. The capital's clerics say treatment isn't cost-effective. People just die quietly. But Do Hwan looks at the haze and sees something else, something no mage in this world sees, because no one else has 30 years of experience with fermentation and the biochemistry of taste. The gray curse is stagnant, cold mana, thickened, settled in the tissues. Any healer would try to force it out, pour in hot mana and push out the cold, roughly, like boiling water down a clogged pipe. But Do Hwan sees it differently. This isn't the clog, it's acidification. The body has become acidic with cold mana. It shouldn't be forced out. It needs to be dissolved, slowly, gently. Broth. Long, warm broth with the right ingredients. He stands on the hill and smiles for the first time in this body. Down below, the city smells of death, but he senses the sea. Where there is sea, there is salt. Where there is salt, one can start anew. He descends and enters Phado, The guards don't check. Who would check those entering a city everyone is fleeing from? The streets are dirty. The streetlights aren't on. An old man coughs at the intersection, a gray rag sticky with phlegm. Do Hwan walks past and reads the diagnosis on the fly. Liver, left lung, 8 months. Still has time. Further on, children are playing. One has a gray spot on his neck. 2 weeks. His kidneys are barely holding on, but he can't treat him on the street. He needs a kitchen, a stove, pots, fish, salt, water. He follows the scent to the port, past a boarded-up pharmacy, past the empty Heroes Guild that left 2 years ago, not profitable. Around the corner, a tavern, a crooked sign. The smell of cooking wafts from the door. Bad cooking. Overcooked broth, burnt onions, too much salt. But it's a kitchen. He goes in. 4 tables. One is occupied by a fisherman slurping murky soup, an old woman behind the counter, hunchbacked, gray-haired. She coughs every 10 seconds, deep and wet. Do Hwan looks at her with the eyes of a healer. Gray spots. Her liver is nearly clogged. Her lungs are a quarter full. She has 2 months left. On her wrist, a gray spot the size of a coin. The very one for which the doctor took 300 gold pieces last month and failed to. The old woman wheezes out what he needs. Do Hwan surveys the kitchen. A wood-burning stove, 2 pots, a cauldron, a barrel of fish, a bundle of seaweed, a piece of ginger on the shelf. And something clicks inside. The healer sees the illness. The cook sees the ingredients. And both know what to do. He asks her to stand at the stove. The old woman shrugs. She doesn't care. She no longer has the strength to cook. Let him play chef. Do Hwan rolls up his sleeves. He pulls the cheapest fish out of the barrel. Small, silvery ones. Local trash for the poor. The healer's eyes see a faint, cool mana in it. Alive. If prepared correctly, it will bind with the broth and become medicine. He wipes off the heads in one motion. Guts them. He rinses them. Sniffs the seaweed. Good stuff. Cuts off a slice of ginger. Takes a pinch of sea salt from the sack. The very same salt the former owner hauled across the straits for 2 years. Now it's clear why. A pot, water, fire. He works in silence for 20 minutes. The old woman watches. The fisherman looks up from his bowl. Something strange is happening in the pot. The broth is clear. Perfect. They don't cook like this in Hadion. The locals throw everything into a cauldron and boil it. Do Hwan doesn't boil it. He simmers it, over low heat. He checks the temperature with his hand over the steam. The ginger gives off heat. The seaweed gives off minerals. The fish gives off protein. And salt does what no magic formula can. It binds the fish's mana to the broth. Osmosis. Simple, earthly osmosis draws out the cold mana and dissolves it in the hot liquid. Turns poison into medicine. No alchemist in this world knows this. To them, food is food, and potions are potions. No one has guessed that there is no boundary between them. He takes the pot off the heat, pours it into a clay bowl, sets it before the old woman. She takes a spoon. Her hand trembles. The first sip. She freezes. Her eyes widen. The second. The third. The broth warms her from the inside. Warm mana spreads through her body. It enters her liver. It dissolves the gray clots, not with an explosion, like warm water melting ice. The fisherman sees the gray hue fade from the old woman's cheeks. Her breathing evens out. The cough doesn't return for 3 minutes. And then the old woman looks at her wrist. The gray spot fades right before her eyes. The edges blur. A minute later, the skin is clear. The old woman raises her hand toward the light, turns it. She lowers it, and she cries. Silently. Tears fall into the bowl, like a person who had been preparing to die for 2 months and suddenly realized they wouldn't die. Do Hwan wipes his hands with a towel. He says calmly that there's a spare corner in her kitchen, that he's willing to work in exchange for a roof over his head and the right to use the pots and pans. The old woman nods once, slowly. He arranges the spices on the shelf next to the ginger. Ginger, pepper, salt, turmeric, garlic, a small arsenal. It's getting dark outside. The gray haze over Phado is thickening. The child is coughing somewhere. The city is quietly dying. But a fire is burning in the old woman's kitchen, and in the pot, the broth is cooling down, the broth that just accomplished the impossible. Do Hwan lies down on the bench. He puts the bag under his head. Tomorrow will be a long day. Find out where to get fish, find good water, figure out how many sick people are in the city and how quickly he can feed them. He's no hero, no mage, doesn't want to join the guild. He's a cook, and he has finally found his kitchen. The morning began with a smell. The stove had cooled overnight, but the barrel of fish stood in the corner, exuding a warm, sour scent. Do Hwan opened his eyes. His back ached from the wooden bench. He sat up, stretched his neck, looked around. In the light of day, the kitchen looked even worse than it had in the evening. The walls were cracked, the ceiling beam had sagged, there was a puddle on the floor from a leaky faucet. But the stove was sturdy, cast iron, old imperial work. These last for decades. He stood up and went out into the dining room. Old woman Kim was already sitting behind the counter, wiping bowls with a rag. Her movements were slow, familiar. She looked up at him. The first thing she did was look at her wrist. She twisted her hand. Clean skin, no gray spot. She said she hadn't slept all night, said she'd checked her hand every hour, afraid it would come back. But it didn't. Do Hwan nodded, said it wouldn't come back if she ate properly. He said he needed to know where the fish market was here. Old woman Kim explained, the market is at the port. It opens at dawn, but half the stalls are closed. The fishermen are sick. Those who are healthy catch little. The good fish are bought up by middlemen and taken north to the capital. Only small fish remain in Phado. Sardines, gobies, fish that get thrown away in the capital. Do Hwan listened. He said that this was exactly what he needed. The old woman looked at him as if he were crazy. He went out onto the street. Phado in the morning was quieter than in the evening. Fog from the sea crept between the houses, the smell of salt and rot. People on the streets walked slowly, with their heads bowed, gray faces, not from the curse, from life. Do Hwan walked toward the port and counted. The healer's eyes worked automatically. Every person he passed was an open book. A woman with a basket, gray curse, early stage, spleen. A man by the well, moderate curse, liver and right lung. A child on the porch, clean for now, but living in a contaminated environment, it's only a matter of time. He counted 14 sick people during a 10-minute walk. He extrapolated that to the entire town. Phado had a population of about 3,000. If the proportion was the same, then at least 500 were sick. The market was small. 10 stalls under wooden awnings. 4 were open. Fishermen were laying out the morning catch. Small silvery fish, goby, some flatfish resembling flounder, and sardines, mountains of sardines. No one was buying them. Do Hwan approached the nearest stall. The fisherman looked at him without interest, an unfamiliar face. New people rarely come to Phado. Do Hwan asked how much the sardines cost. The fisherman named the price. 3 copper coins per bucket, almost a steal. In the capital, a single mid-range potion cost 50 gold coins. A single bucket of trash fish could provide a healing effect just as good, if you knew how to cook it. He bought 2 buckets. The fisherman was surprised. He asked why he needed so many sardines. Do Hwan said he was a cook. The fisherman shrugged. He offered some gobies for a copper coin. Do Hwan took them. On the way back, he stopped by the well. He drew some water. He tasted it. The water wasn't bad. Hard, mineral-rich. Good for broth. Soft water gives a flat taste. Hard water gives body. He returned to the kitchen. Old woman Kim was sitting in the same spot. Yesterday's fisherman was sitting at the table in the corner. He hadn't left. He was waiting. He looked at Do Hwan with an expression that was easy to read. Hope. Fear. Hope was stronger than fear. The fisherman said he'd had a spot on his left hand for 6 months. He said he didn't have money for a doctor. He said he'd seen what had happened yesterday to the mistress's wrist. Do Hwan set the buckets on the floor. He looked at the fisherman with the eyes of a healer. A man in his 40s. Lean. A weathered face. Gray stagnation. Moderate. The liver is 1/3 congested. His left arm, from the wrist to the elbow, is covered with a gray film. Do Hwan nodded. He told him to sit down and wait. He lit the stove. He took out the sardines, and he began to work. This time he was cooking differently, not the way he did for the old woman Kim. For her, it had to be soft and warm. For this fisherman, it needed to be different. His liver was clogged. That meant the broth had to be bitter. Bitter flavors open the liver ducts. Both Eastern medicine on Earth and the healing traditions of Harian knew this. Do Hwan added a thin slice of something from his supplies to the broth, a root resembling gentian. The former Do Hwan had gathered herbs on raids. The current one understood why. The broth simmered for 25 minutes. The fisherman sat and waited. He watched the pot. He watched the cook's hands. At one point, he said his name was Park Tae-seon. He said he had been fishing since he was 14. He said his wife had taken the children and left for the north when the spot appeared on him. Because everyone knows that the curse is incurable, that it's a death sentence, just a slow one. Do Hwan listened in silence. He stirred the broth. He wasn't just listening, he was adjusting the recipe. A fisherman who hadn't slept for 3 nights out of anxiety, who lacked warmth, who had been betrayed. A pinch of ginger on top. Ginger is about warmth, about coming home. The broth was ready. He poured a bowl. He set it in front of the fisherman. Park Tae-seon took the spoon in both hands. The first sip. His eyes closed. His face relaxed. His shoulders dropped. Hot manna flowed inside. It found his liver. It began to work. Slowly. Gently. The bitter root opened the ducts. The warm ginger stimulated the blood. The salty broth bound the cold gray manna and began to draw it out. Do Hwan stood and watched. Through the healer's eyes, he saw everything. He saw how the gray clots in the fisherman's liver softened, how the body began to breathe. The mark on Park Tae-seon's hand faded within 10 minutes. After 20, it vanished completely. The fisherman looked at his hand. He bent and unbent his fingers. The skin was clear, pink, alive. He looked up at Do Hwan. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He couldn't speak. Finally, he said one word. "Thank you." His voice broke halfway through. Old woman Kim behind the counter quietly wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. Do Hwan sat down across from the fisherman. He told him straight out. He said he could cure this illness, but not with herbs or magic, with food. He said it only works if the food is fresh, only if he prepares it himself, only if it's eaten within an hour. You can't take it with you. You can't buy it to stock up. You have to come here and eat it. Park Tae-seon nodded. He listened. Then he asked how much it cost. Do Hwan named the price, 1 copper coin per bowl. The fisherman looked at him as if he had lost his mind. 300 gold coins to a doctor for a potion that didn't help. 1 copper coin for a broth that cured him in 20 minutes. Do Hwan explained. He uses the very fish that fishermen consider trash, the kind no one buys, the kind that costs 3 copper coins a bucket. From 1 bucket, he can make 15 bowls. The cost of 1 bowl is 1/5 of a copper coin. He isn't doing charity work. He's making a profit. It's just that his raw materials cost next to nothing because the whole world isn't looking in the right direction. Park Tae-seon stood up. He said he'd be back. He said he'd bring friends. He left the eatery. Do Hwan spent the rest of the morning in the kitchen. He was preparing supplies, cleaning fish, drying seaweed, sorting through spices. Old woman Kim watched. At some point she asked who he was. Not his name. She'd heard his name. She asked where he'd learned to do what he does. Do Hwan paused. He said he was a healer, a former one. He said he'd been expelled from the party. He said he'd decided to heal in his own way. It was the truth. Not the whole truth, but enough. Afternoon, Park Tae-seon arrived. Not alone. With him were 3 fishermen, 2 with gray spots on their hands, 1 with a gray spot on his neck. All 3 looked at Do Hwan with suspicion. Park Tae-seon showed them his hand. Clean. Pink. They watched. They were silent. Do Hwan didn't try to convince them. He simply stood at the stove. 3 bowls. 3 different recipes. For the first fisherman, whose joints ached, he added more seaweed. Minerals. For the second, whose lung was affected, he increased the amount of ginger. Warming. For the third, with a spot on his neck near the lymph nodes, he added a pinch of turmeric. Anti-inflammatory. 3 bowls. 3 people. 3 recipes. 20 minutes later, the 3 gray spots had vanished. One of the fishermen dropped his spoon. The second cursed under his breath. The third simply sat there, stroking his clear throat with both hands, silently. Park Tae-seon stood in the doorway and smiled, for the first time in 6 months. By evening, 5 more had arrived. Word spread through the port. Old woman Kim's tavern cures the gray curse. Not with potions, not with magic, with food. For a single copper coin. Do Hwan worked until dark, 9 bowls a day, 9 healings. He washed the pots, wiped down the stove, set out the spices for the morning. He sat down on a bench. His back was aching. His hands smelled of fish and ginger. Old woman Kim set a bowl of his own broth in front of him. She said that a cook must eat too. Do Hwan picked up a spoon. The first sip of the day. The hot broth went down his throat, across his chest, down to his stomach. He closed his eyes. For a second, he was back in his kitchen in Seoul. 3 in the morning, quiet, only the broth sloshing. And everything was right. He opened his eyes. No, he was in Phado, in a foreign world, in a foreign body. But a kitchen is a kitchen, no matter where it is. He finished the broth, lay down on the bench. Tomorrow, even more people would come. He needed more fish. He needed to arrange regular deliveries with the fishermen. He needed to fix the second pot. He needed to find more seaweed. The list grew. Do Hwan closed his eyes and fell asleep in 3 seconds, just as he always did. Just like people who've worked all day with their hands and accomplished something real fall asleep. A week passed. Every morning, Do Hwan got up before dawn. He went to the market. He bought sardines and gobies. He returned. He lit the stove. He cooked. By 8 in the morning, people were standing at the diner's door. At first, 5 at a time, then 10. By the end of the week, 15. Old woman Kim didn't recognize her own establishment. For 2 years, she'd had 1 fisherman a day, sometimes none at all. Now, there was a line at her door. She sat behind the counter and accepted copper coins. She put them in a clay pot. By the end of the week, the pot was full, for the first time in 2 years. Do Hwan worked non-stop. Broths in the morning, serious cases in the afternoon. In the evening, those who came after work. Every bowl was unique, each one tailored to a specific person. He couldn't do it any other way. His ability only worked that way. Simply boiling broth and pouring it into bowls didn't work. Or rather, it did work, but it was just ordinary broth. Tasty, hot, but without any healing effect. For the food to heal, he had to know who would be eating it. He had to see the person, read their body, understand what was lacking and what was in excess, and cook with that specific eater in mind. A fisherman with a diseased liver received one thing. A woman with a diseased lung received another. A child in the early stages received a third. It was both a strength and a curse. He couldn't treat hundreds, only 1 at a time, only personally. At the end of the 7th day, he sat in the kitchen and counted. 63 bowls in a week, 63 people, 14 complete cures from the gray curse, the rest at various stages of improvement. The severe cases need 3 to 5 bowls. The mild ones need just one. 63 bowls is 63 copper coins, 6 silver and 3 copper. You can live for a month on that money. Modestly, but it's possible. He kept track in his head. The cook in him was used to keeping accounts. Kilograms, portions, cost price, markup. The main expense is fish. 3 copper coins per bucket. 1 bucket is 15 bowls. He gathers seaweed for free. Old woman Kim showed him a spot on the shore. He's running out of spices. That's a problem. Ginger is available at the market. Expensive, but available. There's not much turmeric. There's still some pepper left from his stock. But in a month, the spices will run out. He needs a supplier. On the morning of the 8th day, a girl walked into the diner. She was thin. She had dark hair down to her shoulders. Her clothes were clean but patched in 5 places. Her hands were covered in small burns. A cook's burns. Do Hwan recognized them immediately. They're the kind left by splattering oil in hot pots. The girl stopped at the threshold. She looked around the room. A line of 7 people. Old Kim behind the counter. Do Hwan at the stove. She wasn't looking at the people. She was watching him work. His hands. The movements of the knife. The way he stirred the broth. The way he took a pinch of spices. She stood there watching for 3 minutes without moving. Do Hwan noticed her. He looked at her with the eyes of a healer. A girl of 24 or 25. Healthy. No curse. But exhausted. She hadn't eaten properly for at least a week. High cortisol, not sleeping, and something else. Traces of mana on her fingertips. Weak. Not a battle mage. Not a healer. Culinary mana. She was a cook. Not just a cook who knew how to infuse mana into food. That's rare. She walked up to the counter, told the old woman Kim she was looking for work. Any job, dishwasher, cleaner, anything. She said she has a younger brother. He's 12. It's just the 2 of them. No money. Enough food for 2 days. Old woman Kim looked at Do Hwan. Do Hwan wiped his hands. He walked over to the girl. He asked her name. So, Rin. He asked where she'd learned to cook. So, Rin fell silent. Her face went stiff. Then she answered briefly. The Imperial Culinary Academy. The capital. They expelled me. Do Hwan nodded. He didn't ask why. Not yet. He returned to the stove. He took the fish out of the barrel. 3 sardines, a small fish, a handful of seaweed. He placed them on the cutting board. He turned to So-Rin. He told her to cook whatever she wanted with these ingredients. However she wanted, without any hints. So-Rin looked at him. She looked at the ingredients. She walked over to the board. She picked up a knife. And she began. Do Hwan watched. The first cut, and he understood everything. Technique. The knife glided through the fish like butter. Not rough, not sweeping. Precise, like a scalpel. Every movement economical. Not a single gesture. She had been trained by the best. It was evident in every inch of her work. So-Rin worked in silence. The sardines were gutted in a minute. The goby was filleted in 40 seconds. The seaweed was cut into thin strips. Even. Identical. She placed the pot on the stove. She poured in water. And she added the fish in a way that Do Hwan had never seen in this world. She didn't throw everything in at once. She put the bones in first. She let them simmer for 3 minutes. Then she added the meat. Then the seaweed. In layers, in stages. She understood that different ingredients release their flavor at different rates. It was basic knowledge of Earth cuisine. But here in Harian, almost no one knew this. 15 minutes later, she took the pot off the heat. She poured it into a bowl, set it on the counter. The broth was good. Not perfect, slightly too salty, a little more seaweed than necessary. But for someone trained in this world without knowledge of Earth's biochemistry, it was a masterpiece. Do Hwan picked up a spoon, tasted it, closed his eyes. A good foundation, a clean flavor, the right texture, and most importantly, mana. Weak, but real. So-Rin had infused mana into the broth. Not consciously, instinctively. Her hands did it on their own. It's a talent one is born with, one that isn't taught. He opened his eyes. He looked at So-Rin. She was standing across from him. Her back was straight, her chin was lifted, but her hands were clenched into fists. Her knuckles were white. She was waiting for the verdict, just as she had once waited at the academy. Do Hwan told her the broth was slightly too salty. He said there was a quarter more seaweed than needed. So-rin flinched, her jaw clenched. She braced for the blow, for the words that it wasn't good enough, that her technique was rough, that she had no talent. Do Hwan said that tomorrow she would stand next to him at the stove at 6 in the morning. He said that for now, he could only pay her with food and a roof over her and her brothers' heads. He said that if she wanted money right away, he would understand. So-rin blinked. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She hadn't expected this. She expected a refusal, or condescension, or a request to wash the dishes, but not a spot next to him at the stove, not a single word about it. Do Hwan added one last thing. He said he wouldn't change a thing in her recipe until she tried it herself. He said she'd made a good broth. He said they'd make an excellent one out of it. So-rin stood there in silence. Then she said she'd be back at 6. She turned and left. Quickly, she practically ran out. Old Lady Kim watched her go. She said the girl was almost in tears. Do Hwan said nothing. He knew that look on her face. He'd seen it in the mirror 20 years ago when the boss in Seoul first told him to stand beside him instead of behind him. When you've been kicked out so many times for your talent that you start to believe talent is a disease. And then someone just puts you right next to them, and the world shatters. So-rin arrived at 5:30, half an hour early, with her younger brother. The boy's name was So-jun, 12 years old, skinny, quiet, big eyes, attentive. Do Hwan put him to work cleaning fish. He showed him how, once. The boy got it on the first try. The same hands as his sisters, the same instinct. Do Hwan and So-rin stood at the stove, the first broth of the day. Do Hwan cooked and explained, not a recipe, a philosophy. He told her that in this kitchen there were no dishes for everyone. There are dishes for specific people. He said that before each bowl, he had to know who would eat it. So-rin listened. She didn't interrupt. When he finished the first bowl and placed it in front of the elderly fisherman in line, she asked how he knew what exactly this person needed. Do Hwan explained. He said he could see what was hurting, what was missing, what was in excess. So-rin frowned. She said it sounded like healing. Do Hwan paused. He said that was exactly what it was. Just through a pot instead of through his hands. So-rin accepted it. Not completely, but she accepted it. And she continued working. She was quick, precise, angry at her mistakes. When she overcooked the ginger in the third broth by 30 seconds, she slapped her wrist. A reflex. A habit. Someone at the academy used to hit her for her mistakes, and she learned to hit herself. Until Hwan took her hand, gently. He said that in this kitchen, they don't hit people for mistakes. Not others, not themselves. He said that overcooked ginger isn't a mistake. It's information. Now she knows 30 seconds more precisely. So-rin pulled her hand away, turned away. She stood with her back turned for about 10 seconds. Then she returned to the stove, silently. But she didn't hit herself anymore. By the end of the day, they had served 24 bowls, a record. Do Hwan and his assistant worked twice as fast. So-rin couldn't prepare the medicinal broths on her own. She couldn't bear to see illness. She couldn't tailor a recipe to a specific person, but she could do everything else. Clean fish, chop seaweed, watch the fire, serve bowls, wash dishes, keep track of time. She freed his hands and mind for the one thing only he could do. Do Hwan stood at the stove at midnight, washing the pot. So-rin had left an hour ago. She'd taken a portion of broth for her brother and left. Old woman Kim had long since fallen asleep in the back room. The kitchen was quiet. Only water dripped from the faucet. Do Hwan dried his hands. He sat down on the bench. A week had passed. 63 plus 24. 87 bowls. 87 people. Phado has 3,000 residents. 500 are sick. At 24 bowls a day and an average of 3 bowls per person, he'll be able to cure the whole town in 2 months. If the spices don't run out. If there's fish. if no one gets in the way. He lay down on the bench, closed his eyes. Somewhere on the outskirts of town, someone was coughing in the dark. But it was quieter than a week ago. Just a little quieter. On the 10th day, the turmeric ran out. Do Hwan shook out all the little bags, empty. There was enough ginger for 3 days, enough pepper for 5. There was still salt, but without the full set of spices, he couldn't get the recipes exactly right. Broth without turmeric still heals, but more slowly. Worse. A person with inflammation needs turmeric. Without it, 3 bowls turn into 7. Time drags on. The line grows. And the line was already long. Every morning, no fewer than 20 people stood at the door of the eatery. Not all of them were from Phado. Word had spread across the port, from the fishing schooners to the merchant, from the barges to the shore of the neighboring town. People walked for 3 hours to eat a bowl of broth for a single copper coin. Do Hwan stood in the market and searched. The stalls in Phado sold fish, meat, grain. There were almost no vegetables. There were no spices at all. There was nowhere to buy turmeric or pepper in Phado. The nearest trading town, Yeongchon, was a 2-day journey to the north. He couldn't leave for 4 days. Without him, the kitchen doesn't heal. With Rin, he makes excellent broth, delicious, nutritious, but without his watchful eye and his ability to tailor it to each person, the broth becomes just food. Good, but ordinary. He stood in the market and thought. And then Park Tae-seon called out to him. The fisherman hadn't come alone. 4 others stood with him, all those whom Do Hwan had healed in the early days. Park Tae-seon said they had discussed it. He said the cook had helped them, and now they wanted to help the cook. He said his schooner sailed along the coast to Soho once a week, and from Soho, coastal vessels went to Yeonchon. If they made a list of what was needed, they could pass the order along the supply chain. In a week, the spices will be in Phado. Do Hwan looked at the 5 fishermen and said nothing. In Seoul, he had spent 20 years building supply chains, negotiations with farmers, contracts with distributors, logistics, cold chains. And here, 5 fishermen with weather-beaten faces are offering to pass the order along the schooner chain. Simply because he cured them. Simply because that's what normal people do. Do Hwan wrote a list: turmeric, ginger, black and white pepper, dried garlic, coriander, mustard seeds, vinegar. And one more item he added after a moment's hesitation: soybeans. In this world, there was an analog of soybeans, similar in structure. The former Do Hwan had seen it in the northern provinces. It could be used to make a fermented paste, an analog of gochujang, an analog of miso. Fermentation takes time, months, but if he started now, in 2 or 3 months, he would have a tool that no other chef in Harian possessed. A fermented product in which beneficial bacteria have already broken down proteins into amino acids. Absorption is instantaneous. Its therapeutic potential is 3 times higher than that of raw ingredients. Park Tae-seon took the list. He read it. He didn't understand half the names, but he nodded. He said he would do it. He left for the port. Do Hwan to the kitchen. So Rin was already working. The fish had been gutted. The seaweed was chopped. The water was heating up. She looked at him questioningly. He said the spices would be ready in a week. So Rin nodded and continued chopping. They worked. Morning, day, evening. 22 bowls, fewer than yesterday. Without turmeric, some had to be sent back. He couldn't refuse. He had to ask them to come back in a week. Do Hwan hated this. He hated looking into the eyes of a man with a gray spot on his throat and saying he couldn't do it today. On the 13th day, what he had been waiting for and fearing happened. A man in clean clothes entered the diner. Not a fisherman, not a farmer, not a dock worker. A suit, dark blue, fine fabric, polished shoes, a clipboard with papers in his hand. He looked around, assessed the line, assessed the size of the kitchen, looked at Do Hwan, introduced himself. a sales agent from the southern branch of Hansol Alchemy. He said the company had learned of an unlicensed food establishment with purported healing properties. He said it was an interesting case. He said the company would like to discuss a partnership. His phrasing was smooth, rehearsed, a polite smile. His eyes were cold. Do Hwan stood at the stove with a ladle in his hand. He looked at the agent. Through the eyes of a healer, he saw that the man was perfectly healthy. No curse. Good nutrition. Good sleep. A man from another world. From a world where fish aren't caught but bought. Where illness isn't cured but treatment is sold. The agent continued. He said that Hansol Alchemy was ready to offer a franchise. They would handle supply and licensing. He would receive official contractor status, a percentage of sales, legal protection, the brand. He said that without a license, his activities technically violated the decree on unlicensed healing from the 12th year of King Minho's reign. A fine, shutdown, arrest if necessary. Do Hwan listened. He stirred the broth. He took his time answering. The people in line were silent. They were listening too. Park Tae-sun stood by the door and looked at the agent the way fishermen look at a rat that has climbed into a barrel of catch. Do Hwan finally answered, calmly. He said he wasn't a healer. He said he was a cook. He said he was making broth. Broth isn't covered by the decree on healing. Broth is food. To license food, you need a patent from the Cooks Guild, not the Alchemists Corporation. The agent blinked. His smile faltered slightly. He hadn't expected a simple country cook to know the laws. Do Hwan knew. The former Do Hwan had been an SS healer and had worked in the guild system for 2 years. He knew all the loopholes, all the wording, all the legal distinctions between healing and nutrition. The agent changed tactics. He said it was all just formalities. He said the point was something else. He said that if the broth really cures Gray Curse, then it's a breakthrough. And a breakthrough of this magnitude cannot remain in the hands of a single man in a forgotten port. It must be scaled up, reproduced, made accessible to everyone. Do Hwan set down his ladle. He looked the agent in the eye. He said his broth isn't reproduced. He said it only works fresh. Only when prepared personally, only for a specific person. It can't be bottled and sold. It can't be put on an assembly line. What Hansol is used to here won't work. The agent jotted something down on this tablet. He smiled. He said he understood. He said the company would still like to stay in touch. He left a business card on the counter. He nodded. He left. Old Lady Kim picked up the card with 2 fingers, like a dead mouse. She tossed it into the trash can. Sorin stood by the stove and said nothing. Her face was tense. Do Hwan turned to the line. He said it was the next person's turn. People started moving. Life went on. But Do Hwan knew. This was the beginning, not the end. Hansol Alchemy doesn't send sales agents out of curiosity. They send agents when they sense a threat. And a threat to an alchemical corporation is simple. Someone is providing treatment more cheaply. Someone heals better. And someone does it using ingredients the corporation considers trash. That night, Do Hwan lay on a bench and thought. He needed to speed things up. He needed to heal as many people as possible before Hansol returned with something more serious than a polite agent. He needed the city to take his side, not out of gratitude, out of practical calculation. If enough people in Phado are healthy thanks to him, then closing his kitchen would mean harming the city. And harming an entire city is harder than harming a single cook. He closed his eyes. A recipe swirled in his head. Broth for tomorrow morning, for the woman in line with severe corruption in both lungs. She needs something hot, spicy, with a triple dose of ginger. If there's enough ginger, there should be enough. For 2 more days. Then a shipment will arrive from Park Tae-sun. It should arrive. He fell asleep with the taste of ginger on his tongue. The 17th day, morning. So Rin stood at the stove and cursed, quietly but fiercely. The broth in the 3rd pot had gone wrong. She'd added the seaweed too early, just a minute too early. For an ordinary cook, the difference is imperceptible. For her, it's a disaster. She had already reached out to slap her wrist. She stopped. She lowered her hand. She clenched her fist. She looked at Do Hwan. He was standing nearby, slicing ginger. He didn't turn around. He didn't comment. He simply said that the broth could be saved if she added a pinch of salt now and turned down the heat. Salt would counteract the premature bitterness of the seaweed. So Rin did it. She tasted it a minute later. The broth had improved. Not perfect, but passable. She exhaled. Do Hwan still wasn't looking at her, but the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. So Rin noticed. She turned away, her cheeks flushed, but not from embarrassment. For the first time, not from embarrassment. The line outside started at the door and stretched around the corner. 26 people, a record. Do Hwan counted in his head. At the current pace, they'd serve everyone by evening, unless there were any difficult cases. Severe cases require more time, more concentration, more ingredients. And they're running low on ingredients right now. The shipment from Park Tae-sun arrived 2 days ago. A sack of turmeric, a sack of pepper, ginger, vinegar, and most importantly, a bag of beans, a soy substitute. Do Hwan had hidden the beans in the back room, soaked them in a wooden tub of warm water, the first stage of fermentation. So Rin asked why. Do Hwan explained briefly. He said that in 3 months, these beans would become a paste. He said that the paste would increase the healing effect of the broths several times over. So Rin didn't understand. Fermentation in Harian was primitive. Wine, beer, sauerkraut. The idea that one could deliberately control the decomposition process and obtain a product with specific properties was a revolution for this world. Do Hwan didn't explain further. He would show her when the results were in. Words mean nothing. The plate is what counts. By noon, they had served 15 people. So Rin worked like a machine. She cleaned, she cut, she served, she washed, she watched the fire. Her movements had become even more precise over the past week. She absorbed every word Do Hwan spoke, every gesture, every movement of his hands. But she didn't copy. She reworked it. She added her own touch. Yesterday, she suggested cutting the seaweed into small squares instead of strips. She said that way they released their flavor more evenly. Do Hwan tasted it. She was right. He told her so. So Rin froze. Then she quickly turned back to the stove. She was silent all evening, but she worked with such fierce precision that even old lady Kim noticed and shook her head. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the diner door flew open. Not the way customers open it, the way those who are used to entering without asking open it. A girl stood in the doorway, tall, a head taller than So-rin, short black hair, a scar across her left eyebrow, thin and old. A short spear in a sheath hung from her belt. Travel clothes, dusty. She had been walking a long time. Her eyes scanned the room in a second and a half, assessing the exits, the arrangement of the furniture, the number of people, distances. A professional gaze, combat ready. Do Hwan looked at her through the eyes of a healer. Healthy, a strong body, dense mana, rank B, maybe B+, traces of old wounds, many old wounds. Her right shoulder had been broken and had healed unevenly. Her left knee was slightly stiff. 3 healed cracks on her right ribs. But no curse. She wasn't sick. She hadn't come for treatment. The girl approached the counter. She said her name was Yoon Ara. She said she had come from Yeonchan, a 3-day journey. She said she'd heard about a cook who cures gray curse with food. She said she'd come to check if he was a charlatan. Her voice was even, no malice, no aggression, but not a shred of trust either. Old woman Kim behind the counter tensed up, so Rin gripped her knife more firmly. Instinct. The spear on the stranger's belt did not inspire relaxation. Do Hwan wiped his hands. He asked why she needed to know. Yunara paused. Then she spoke, briefly, dryly. Her father had been a fisherman in Phado. He had died of the Gray Curse 11 months ago. At the time, she was serving in the border guard in the north. She was earning money to buy him a potion. She didn't make it in time. When she returned with the money, her father had already been dead for a month. He was buried on a hill outside the city. She only had enough money for a headstone. She turned around and went back to the guard. She served another 6 months. She was wounded, discharged, no pension. She returned to the south and heard that in Phado, someone was curing the curse for a copper coin. The tavern fell silent. The people in line stared at the floor. Many knew her father. Many had been at the funeral. Do Hwan listened. His face was calm, but inside, something tightened. Not pity. Pity is useless. Recognition. He knew that look. The look of a man who was too late, who brought the medicine, but the patient died, who did everything right, but time proved stronger. Do Hwan told her he wasn't a charlatan, said he could prove it, asked her to sit down and wait. Yun sat down, back straight, hand on the spear's scabbard. She wasn't waiting for a miracle. She was waiting for confirmation that the world is unfair and miracles don't happen. Do Hwan returned to the stove. Next in line, a man in his 50s, a gray spot on both forearms. A severe case. The affliction is lodged in the liver and spleen. He was preparing broth. 22 minutes. Turmeric, ginger, white pepper, fish from the morning catch. The man ate, slowly. Yun watched, not the cook, the patient's hands. The gray spots began to fade at the 8-minute mark. By the 12th minute, they were gone. The man stared at his forearms. He rolled up his sleeves. Clear skin. He exhaled, long and deep, like a man who had been holding his breath for 6 months. Yun saw everything. His face hadn't changed, but his fingers had loosened their grip on the spear sheath. She looked at Do Hwan with different eyes, not with trust, not yet, with something more dangerous, with a hope she didn't want to feel. Do Hwan approached her after attending to 3 more people. He sat across from her. He said he couldn't save her father. He said he hadn't been there at the time. He said he was sorry. Yun was silent. Then she asked quietly. She asked how many more people in the city were sick. Do Hwan answered, about 300, by his estimate. At the current pace, 2 months of work, if no one interferes. Yun asked who might interfere. Do Hwan told her about Agent Hansol Alchemy's visit, about the threat of licensing, about how the corporation wouldn't back down. Yun nodded. She stood up. She said she would stay in Phado. She said she needed work and a place to stay. She said she knew how to fight. Do Hwan looked at her. He said he didn't need a fighter. Yun replied that he did. He just didn't realize it yet. She was right. He didn't know how much yet. Yun settled into a room above the tavern. Old woman Kim rented it to her for a silver coin a month. Yun paid with her last bit of money. In the morning, she took her place by the door. Not aggressively, she just stood there, watching. People walked past her. Some recognized her. Yun, the fisherman's daughter. They nodded. She nodded back. Her presence changed the atmosphere. Not words, no threats, just a fact. This kitchen now had a guard, a B rank with a spear. 2 days after Yun arrival, the first incident occurred. Night, 3 o'clock. Do Hwan woke up to a smell, smoke, not from firewood, oil, chemical. He jumped up, ran out into the street. The neighboring house was on fire, an abandoned warehouse across the alley. The fire was bright, greasy, oil. Someone had doused the walls with oil and set them ablaze. Yun was already standing outside, spear in hand, her eyes scanning the street. The fire hadn't spread to the tavern. The wind was blowing the other way. We were lucky. Or the arsonist was inexperienced, or it was a warning, not an attempt. By morning, the warehouse had burned down. There were no firefighters in Phado. The neighbors hauled water from the well. They managed. Do Hwan stood in the doorway and looked at the charred boar. Yun stood beside him. She said quietly that it wasn't an accident. She said the oil on the walls was an oily solution used in alchemical laboratories for waste disposal. She'd seen it at the border guard post. The supplier was Hansol Alchemy. Do Hwan nodded. He wasn't surprised. 14 days. First, a polite agent with a proposal, then arson through the wall. The next step would be more serious. He turned and went to the kitchen. In an hour, the door would open. People would come, sick, hungry, tired. They didn't care who set the warehouse on fire or why. They needed a bowl of broth, and they would get it. So Rin was already lighting the stove. So June was cleaning fish. Old woman Kai was wiping down the counter. Yoon Ara stood by the door. A normal morning. Almost normal. Until Hwan picked up a knife. He started cutting ginger. His hands didn't shake. In Seoul, someone had set his car on fire because he refused to pay racketeers for a spot at the food market. Back then, he'd also gotten up in the morning and gone to cook. The world changes. People don't. Someone sets things on fire. Someone cooks. He cooks. 24 bowls that day. 24 healings. The line didn't get any shorter, but the faces in it had changed. Before, they came with despair. Now, with hope. Some smiled while waiting in line. They talked to each other. For the first time in a long while, Phado felt like a living city, not a waiting room outside a morgue. In the evening, Yoon Ara came into the kitchen. Do Hwan was washing pots. She sat down on a stool. She was silent for a minute. Then she said she needed to ask him something. She said that the last time she was in Phado, she stopped by her father's neighbors. An elderly couple, husband and wife, both in their 70s. They had fed her father when he was sick, brought him rice, changed his bandages. They buried him at their own expense when she didn't arrive in time. Both are sick. Gray curse. Severe. She wanted to ask if Do Hwan could see them tomorrow, without waiting in line. Do Hwan stopped, set down the pot, looked at Yoon Ara. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the floor, her hands clenched on her knees. It wasn't just a request. It was the first time she had asked for something for herself. Not out of duty, not for the sake of justice, for the people she loved. Do Hwan said she should bring them to the opening. Yoon nodded. She stood up. She walked to the door. She stopped. Without turning around, she said that her father loved grilled mackerel with rice. She said that the neighbors said he ate it every night, and that after his death, she couldn't bear to look at mackerel. Do Hwan listened. He was silent. Yoon Ara left. The door closed quietly. Do Hwan stood at the sink. Water ran down his hands. He thought about grilled mackerel with rice, about the simple dish that a fisherman ate every evening, about the smell that was, for his daughter, the smell of home, and the smell of loss. He dried his hands. He took a mackerel out of the barrel, fresh, the morning catch. He placed it on the cutting board. He looked at it. The fish was silvery, fatty, with the distinctive smell of the sea. Do Hwan knew 100 ways to cook mackerel, but he needed just one. The one that fisherman Yoon used to make, the one he had never tasted, the one he would have to piece together from other people's memories and neighbors' stories. Tomorrow he would ask the old men how exactly Yoon the elder fried the fish, in what kind of oil, with what kind of salt, for how many minutes. He would recreate the taste. Not for treatment, for her. Because sometimes a person doesn't need medicine. They need a plate that smells like home. He put the fish back in the barrel. He lay down on the bench. The morning will be long. The old folks need to be treated. The mackerel needs to be fried just right. And the 26 people in line need to be fed too. One kitchen, one cook, 300 patients, and a corporation that's already setting fire to houses across the wall. Do Hwan closed his eyes. He fell asleep instantly. The way people fall asleep who have no time for insomnia. The morning of the 18th day began with 2 elderly people at the doorstep, husband and wife. He was over 70. She was a little younger. Both were thin, both were gray. Not from the dawn, from the curse. Yoon Ara led them by the hand, one on each side. The old man walked slowly. His left leg dragged. The old woman breathed with a wheeze. Every breath was a struggle. Do Hwan met them at the door. He looked at them with the eyes of a healer. The old man. A severe case of gray corruption. The liver is 2/3 clogged. The spleen is affected. The left leg has lost blood supply due to monostagnation in the hip joint. He needs a long course of treatment, 5 bowls at a minimum, maybe 7. The old woman. Moderate corruption, but with complications. lungs at 1/3 capacity. The heart is beating irregularly. Mana in the pericardium has thickened. This is more dangerous than the liver. The heart does not forgive delays. She needs to clear the cardiac congestion first and then treat the lungs. 2 stages, 3 or 4 bowls. Do Hwan sat them down at the table by the stove, a warm spot. Old woman Kim brought water. So Rin was already standing by the stove, waiting. Do Hwan started with the old man's wife. The heart comes first. He took a fish from the morning catch, not sardines, goby. Goby is fattier. Fat is needed for heart mana. It passes through the vessel walls more gently than protein. He added seaweed, thinly sliced. According to So Rin's method, in squares. Ginger, a double portion. The heart needs warmth. And the last ingredient, a drop of vinegar. Vinegar from Park Tae-sun's supply. The acid thins out stagnant mana. Earth medicine knew that sour things thin the blood. The same principle applied here, only with mana. The broth simmered for 18 minutes. Do Hwan didn't leave the pot's side. He monitored every second. Temperature, color, smell, the consistency of the steam. So Rin stood nearby and watched. She took it all in. She saw how he worked, but she didn't yet understand why exactly this way. Do Hwan poured a bowl. He carried it to the old woman. He set it before her. She took a spoon with trembling hands. The first sip. Her eyes closed. Do Hwan watched. Through the eyes of a healer, he saw the warm mana of the broth enter her bloodstream, find her heart, envelop the pericardium. The acetic acid began to dissolve the gray stagnation, slowly, gently, not in a rush. The old woman ate. The color of her face changed. The grayish hue on her cheekbones receded. Her breathing evened out. The wheezing subsided. By the last spoonful, she was breathing evenly, deeply, for the first time in months. She looked at her husband. She smiled. He took her hand. Do Hwan returned to the stove. Now the old man. A different recipe. Liver and spleen. Bitterness is needed. Turmeric is needed. And time. 25 minutes instead of 18. The fish bones must release all their minerals. He cooked. The old man ate. The effect was weaker than with his wife. The damage was too deep for a single bowl. But the gray spot on the back of his hand had faded. His leg relaxed slightly. The old man wiggled the toes of his left foot, for the first time in 2 months. Yoon Ara stood against the wall and watched. Her face was stony. Her hands were at her sides, but her eyes were wet. She blinked frequently. She didn't let the tears fall. Do Hwan approached her after the old couple had finished eating. He said quietly that the old man needed to come every day, at least 5 days, the old woman twice more. He said they would both get better. Yoon Ara nodded. She couldn't speak. She turned and led the old people out onto the street. Do Hwan returned to the kitchen. So Rin was standing by the stove, watching him. She asked why he was treating them for free. The old people, orphans in the mornings, those who don't even have a copper coin. Do Hwan was silent for a moment. Then he said that in his previous life, he had a restaurant, an expensive one, a beautiful one, stars on the sign. People paid hundreds for a plate. And every evening, through the glass door, he saw an old man on a bench across the street. The old man ate bread from a bag. Every evening. And every evening, Do Hwan told himself that tomorrow he would bring him a plate. And he never did. Because he didn't have time. Because the chef wouldn't let him. Because the customers were waiting. Because there was always a reason. So Rin listened. She didn't interrupt. Do Hwan said that here he had no more reasons. There was the kitchen, there was fish, there were people. Everything else was superfluous. So Rin remained silent. She turned back to the stove. A minute later, her shoulders trembled slightly. Just once. She didn't turn around. Do Hwan didn't look. He gave her time. They continued working. The line was waiting. By noon, they had served 17 people. Do Hwan let So Rin take a break. She left to feed her brother. Old Lady Kim took her place at the counter. Yoon Ara stood by the door. Do Hwan was left alone at the stove. And then he did what he had planned the night before. He took a mackerel out of the barrel. Fresh, fatty, silvery. That morning, he asked his elderly neighbors how old Yoon used to cook the fish, what he fried it in, how much salt, how he served it. The answers were simple. He fried it in a pan, seaweed oil, coarse salt. He fried it until the skin cracked. He served it with rice, white rice, nothing else. The simplest dish in the world. Do Hwan placed the mackerel on the cutting board. He looked at it. He wasn't preparing a healing dish. He was preparing a memory. You don't need manna for that. You don't need the eyes of a healer. You only need precision and understanding. He filleted the fish, 2 fillets. He salted them with coarse salt, left them for 3 minutes. The salt would draw out the excess moisture. The skin would become drier. It would crackle just right when fried, like the fisherman who fried it in an old cast-iron skillet every evening. Seaweed oil. Do Hwan found it in old woman Kim's pantry. Thick, dark green, smelling of the sea. He poured it into the pan. He heated it. He placed the fillets skin side down. A sound, a sizzle. The smell filled the kitchen. Fried fish, salt, the sea, home. He fried it for 4 minutes on one side. He flipped it, 3 minutes on the other. The skin cracked evenly, golden, crispy. He cooked the rice separately, plain white rice, no additives, no spices. He piled it high on a plate. Next to it, 2 pieces of mackerel, nothing else. He set the plate on the counter. He looked at Yunara. She was standing by the door. She didn't see it. She didn't smell it. The wind from the street carried the scent away. Do Hwan called her over, told her to sit down, to eat. Yunara approached, sat down on a stool, looked at the plate, froze. Mackerel, rice, just like that. No frills, no sauces. The fried skin was cracked in the same places. Coarse salt, the smell of seaweed oil. She recognized it. Not a dish. Evening. A small house by the harbor. Her father at the stove. The sizzling of oil. Rice in a wooden bowl. She reached for the plate. She stopped. Her fingers trembled. Do Hwan stepped away. He returned to the stove. He didn't look. Some things you have to go through alone. Yunara ate, slowly, every bite, every grain of rice. She didn't cry. The tears flowed on their own, down her cheeks, down her chin, falling onto the counter. She didn't wipe them away. She just ate and cried, silently. 5 years. For 5 years, she hadn't allowed herself to remember that taste. For 5 years, she'd avoided fishmongers. For 5 years, she'd turned away from the smell of grilled mackerel, because to remember is to feel, and to feel is to admit that he's gone, and that she was too late. She finished eating. She put down her plate. She sat there for a minute, 2, 3. Then she stood up. She walked over to the sink. She washed the plate, her own, with her own hands. She put it on the shelf. She turned to Do Hwan. He was standing with his back to her, cutting fish for the next broth. Yunara said one word. "Thank you." Her voice didn't waver, because she wasn't crying anymore. She had already cried it all out. 5 years of grief fit into a single plate of mackerel and rice. Do Hwan nodded, without turning around. Yunara returned to the door. She stood up, straightened herself, her hand on the spear, but her shoulders were slightly softer than they had been that morning, just a tiny bit. So Rin returned from her break. She caught the scent, fried fish. She looked at Do Hwan, at Yunara, at the empty shelf where the washed plate had stood. She understood. She didn't ask. She stood at the stove. They worked until evening, 26 bowls, a new record. The old man neighbor came back for seconds. The bruise on his palm had faded even more. His leg was responding better. He told Do Hwan he'd come back tomorrow. Do Hwan replied that he'd be waiting. At night, he lay on the bench and listened. The sea beyond the harbor, the creaking of boats, a distant cough. Closer than yesterday. No, further away. Further than yesterday. The city was recovering, slowly, one bowl at a time, but it was recovering. A month, 30 days in Phado. Do Hwan stood by the stove and counted. 412 bowls, 161 people. Of those, 93 were completely healed of the gray curse. The rest are on the right track. They come every day or every other day. They drink flaxseed tea. They're getting better. Spices arrive regularly. Park Tae-seon has set up the supply chain. Once a week, a schooner comes from Soho with sacks. Turmeric, ginger, pepper, salt, beans for fermentation. The chang in the back room smells sour and thick. The fermentation was going well. Do Hwan checked it every morning. He stirred it. He sniffed it. He tasted it with his fingertip. 2 more months. Maybe a month and a half if the temperature doesn't drop. The kitchen had changed. Old woman Kim had repaired the sign. She wrote the new name on it, Teppo, the big wave. So-jun came up with the name. The boy sat on the threshold one evening and looked out at the sea. He said the waves in the harbor were big only in winter, and the cook made a big wave in the middle of summer. Old woman Kim smiled and wrote, in crooked letters, on a piece of wood. She nailed it above the door. So Rin tidied up the kitchen. The shelves were cleaned, the pots were arranged by size. The spices were in labeled bags. There were 2 cutting boards. A carpenter from the port carved the new one, for free. Do Hwan had cured his mother. Yoon Ara reinforced the door. She replaced the hinges. She installed a bolt. She slept lightly at night. A spear lay next to the bed. 2 weeks had passed since the arson. Nothing new. Silence. But Yoon Ara didn't trust the silence. She said that the silence before an attack was worse than the attack itself. Do Hwan agreed. He too was waiting. On the morning of the 31st day, children walked into the diner. 5 of them. Orphans from the port district. The oldest was about 10. The youngest was 5. Dirty, barefoot, skinny. 2 of them had gray spots on their necks. Do Hwan fed the orphans for free every morning. Simple broth, rice porridge with fish. No medicinal ingredients, just food, hot and filling. But these 5 were new. They hadn't come before. The oldest boy stood in the doorway. He didn't come in. He looked at Do Hwan from under his brow. Distrust, fear, pride. Do Hwan didn't call them in, didn't beckon them. He simply set 5 bowls on the nearby table. He sat back down at the stove. He worked. He didn't look their way. 3 minutes later, the children came in. Quietly, like mice. They sat down. They picked up their spoons. They ate greedily, quickly. The oldest ate last. First, he checked to see if the younger ones had eaten. Then he ate himself. Do Hwan watched out of the corner of his eye. The oldest boy reminded him of So-jun. The same eyes, the same hands, the same mannerisms of an older child who was used to acting like an adult. After the meal, the older boy walked up to the counter. He placed 3 copper coins on it, all he had. You could tell by the way he took them out, from his bosom, wrapped in a rag. He'd been saving them. Do Hwan looked at the coins. He looked at the boy. He pushed the coins back. He said it was free for children in the morning. He said they should come every day. The boy looked at him. He didn't believe him. He clenched the coins in his fist. He turned around. He led the younger ones away. At the door, he turned back. He looked at Do Hwan once more, long and hard. He memorized the face. They came the next morning, and the next, and every morning after that. A week later, the older boy began helping So-jun clean fish. No one asked him to. He just stood next to him and started. So-jun showed him how. The boy caught on quickly. Hana Park appeared on the 34th day. Do Hwan didn't immediately realize who she was. Standing in the doorway was a girl in white, a long braid down to her waist, a pale face, quiet eyes, a priestess's attire, but without the temple insignia, removed, or torn off. She asked permission to enter. Her voice was soft. So Rin looked at her suspiciously. Yoon Ara sized her up. No weapons, not dangerous. Hana Park said she was a former priestess of the Temple of Healing. She said she had been defrocked. She said she had come to Phado because in the capital, people whisper about this cuisine. About a cook who cures the gray curse for a copper coin. The priests laugh, the officials dismiss it. But the people believe, and she believes, because she herself used to treat the poor for free in the temple basement for 3 years, until they found out, until they expelled her for using the temple's resources on beggars without payment. Do Hwan listened. He looked at her through the eyes of a healer. The girl is healthy. Her mana is bright, pure, temple-like, healing. Weak compared to his SS rank, maybe C rank, maybe C+, but she's a real healer, not a culinary mage like Sorin, a real one, with hands that know how to diagnose and treat. He asked what she could do. Hana listed them. Diagnosis by touch, reducing inflammation, accelerating wound healing, clearing dust from the lungs. The basic repertoire of a temple healer. She lacks the strength for severe cases, but for mild and moderate ones, it's more than enough. That's what Hwan thought, quickly. Hana can't brew medicinal broths. That's his gift. But she can do what he can't. Diagnose without his eyes, explain to people what's happening to them, keep track of patients, determine the order of priority, who needs urgent care, who can wait. Until now, he'd done everything himself, examined everyone, decided, prepared, dispensed. With Hannah Park, he can delegate the initial examination. She greets them, diagnoses, sorts by severity. He prepares based on her notes. Speed will increase by 1/3. Do Hwan offered her a job, said he could pay her very little, a silver coin a week and food. Hannah Park looked at him. She said she didn't need money. She said she needed a place where she could treat people without fear of punishment. Do Hwan nodded. He said he had such a place. 4 tables and a wood-burning stove. Hannah Park smiled. For the first time during the entire conversation. A quiet smile, but a genuine one. She started working that very day. She sat down at the table by the entrance. Everyone who came in approached her first. She took their hand. She closed her eyes. 10 seconds later, she opened them and quietly stated the diagnosis. Moderate gray taint, liver, left lung. Or this, mild taint, just the skin. 1 bowl will suffice. Or this, severe case, heart and kidneys. A course of treatment is needed. Do Hwan received the information before he saw the patient. He could start preparing in advance. While one was eating, he was already cooking for the next. So Rin worked on preparation, Hannah on sorting, Yoon Ara at the door, old woman Kim on the money. So June and the orphan boy on the fish. A team. For the first time, it like a team. 32 bowls on the first day with Hana, a record. Do Hwan stood at the stove in the evening and washed the pots. His hands were buzzing, his back ached, but he was smiling. A small kitchen, 6 tables, 4 women, 2 boys, 1 old woman, and a line that never ends. So Rin came up from behind. She said they were running out of fish. They'd need more tomorrow. They needed to arrange daily deliveries with the fishermen. 2 buckets weren't enough. They needed 5. Do Hwan nodded. He said he'd talk to Park Tae-sun in the morning. So Rin paused. Then she said something else. She said a man had approached her at the market that evening. A man in nice clothes. He asked about the kitchen. How many people a day? What ingredients? Who the suppliers were? So Rin didn't answer. She left. But the man didn't look like a fisherman, and he didn't look like a merchant. He looked like a man who asks questions for money. Do Hwan stopped washing the pot. He fell into thought. An agent, an arsonist, now intelligence. Hansol hasn't forgotten. Hansol is gathering information, studying him, looking for pressure points, suppliers, ingredients, the people around him. He wiped his hands. He looked out the window. A dark sky. The lights of the port. Somewhere beyond the northern horizon, in a beautiful office, a man in an expensive suit sits reading a report about a small eatery in Phado that heals people with fish broth. This man believes the problem is solvable, that all it takes is applying pressure in the right place. He's wrong, but he doesn't know it yet. Do Hwan lay down on the bench. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow is the 35th day. There's a lot of work ahead. On the 42nd day, a schooner flying a black and green flag entered the port of Phado. The Hansol alchemy flag. Yoon Ara was the first to see it. She was standing on the roof of the tavern, looking out at the sea. A habit. Every morning she would go up and scan the horizon. She came down and said one word to Do Hwan. Ship. Do Hwan went out onto the street. He looked toward the port. It was a medium-sized schooner, a merchant ship. But standing on the deck were people who didn't look like merchants. 5 of them. In identical gray uniforms, with short swords at their belts, and one in civilian clothes, a dark suit, a clipboard with papers, another agent, or the same one, with backup. They came ashore an hour later, walked down the main street toward the tavern. They weren't in a hurry. They knew the way. They'd been here before. Or they'd gotten a detailed map from a scout at the market. Do Hwan was standing at the stove. He was cooking the morning broth for the old men neighbors. The old man came every day. The bruise on his arm had almost disappeared. His leg was responding. 2 more days and the treatment would be complete. The door opened. The agent entered first. 5 men in uniforms stood behind him. Yoon Ara stood by the wall, hand on her spear, not aggressively, for now. It was a different agent, not the one who had come the first time. Older, tougher, no smile. He introduced himself, Inspector of the Southern Province Sanitation Department. He said a complaint had been filed regarding an unlicensed food establishment with suspected use of unlabeled alchemical substances. He said that, in accordance with the decree on food production safety, he was authorized to conduct an inspection. He said that if violations were found, the kitchen would be sealed until a decision on the provincial court. Different wording, different tone. This isn't a proposal for cooperation. It's pressure. Do Hwan set down the ladle, wiped his hands, looked at the inspector. The man believed what he was saying, partially. He really is an inspector. The documents are genuine. But the complaint was written in Hansel's office, and the uniforms behind him were paid for from the same place. Old woman Kim gripped the edge of the counter with her white-knuckled fingers. So-rin froze by the stove, a knife in her hand. Hannah Park sat at her table and looked at the inspector with her clear, quiet eyes. 12 people stood in line at the door, silently, listening. Park Tae-seon was among them. He stood calmly, but his fists were clenched. Do Hwan spoke, calmly, without haste. He said the inspection was lawful. He said he was ready to make the kitchen available for inspection. He said there were no alchemical substances in his kitchen. There was fish. There was seaweed. There were spices. There was water. There was fire. All of this could be checked. The inspector nodded. With a gesture, he sent 2 men in uniforms into the kitchen. They walked past So-rin. She took a step back, not out of fear, out of rage. Do Hwan saw her knuckles turn white on the knife handle. He quietly told her to put the knife away. So-rin did, with difficulty. The men in uniform inspected the kitchen. They opened the barrels. They sniffed the spices. They felt the pots. One took a small glass device out of his pocket, a mana scanner, standard equipment for alchemical corporations. The device searches for traces of magical processing in ingredients. The use of unlicensed magical substances in food is prohibited by law. Fines, confiscation, prison. The soldier ran the scanner over every surface. Pots, cutting boards, spices, barrels, fish, seaweed, walls, floor, ceiling. The device remained silent, not a single beep. Do Hwan stood and waited. He knew there would be silence. His kitchen left no traces of mana. That was the essence of his ability. Earthly cooking, combined with healing skills, produced a result that didn't exist within this world's paradigm. No magical processing. No alchemical reagents, just food. Simply prepared in a certain way for a specific person. To the scanner, it was invisible, just as a wooden knife is invisible to a metal detector. Mundir lowered the device. He looked at the inspector. He shook his head. Clean. The inspector frowned. This wasn't part of the plan. He had expected to find at least something, traces of mana, unaccounted for reagents, expired ingredients, anything for the record. Then Hwan offered the inspector a seat. He offered a bowl of broth. On the house. The inspector refused. dry. He said the inspection was complete. He said no violations had been found, but he warned that a reinspection could be scheduled at any time. He said he recommended obtaining a license from the Cook's Guild to avoid future problems. He turned around. He left. The uniforms followed him. Silence. Then a collective sigh. The 12 people in line exhaled at the same time. Old woman Kim sat down on a chair. Her legs wouldn't hold her. So Rin placed the knife on the counter. Her hands were shaking. Yoon-ara didn't move. She stood by the wall. She stared at the closed door. Her fingers slowly unclenched the spear sheath. Hannah Park sat motionless. Her face was calm, but pale. Do Hwan returned to the stove. His hands weren't shaking. His voice was steady. He said it was the next one's turn. The line started moving. Life went on. But everyone knew this wasn't the end. The inspector hadn't found anything. That meant Hansol would come with a different tool. Not for an inspection, with something worse. That evening, Do Hwan sat on the porch. Yoon-ara was beside him. They were silent. They looked out at the harbor. The schooner flying the black and green flag had left 2 hours ago. Do Hwan spoke first. He said they needed a license. A real one. A license from the Chef's Guild would protect them from repeat inspections. It would grant them legal status. It would make closing the kitchen a court procedure rather than an inspector's decision. Yoon-ara asked where to get one. Do Hwan knew. A memory from his previous body. The nearest branch of the Cook's Guild was in Soho, 2 hours by boat. They needed to submit an application, pay the fee, pass a skills test. The fee is 5 gold pieces. They had 4 silver pieces and a handful of copper coins. Do Hwan did the math in his head. With their current income, 5 gold pieces meant 2 months of work without expenses. But there were expenses. Fish, spices, repairs. It was unrealistic. Park Tae-seon stepped out of the darkness. He had been sitting at a nearby bench and had heard the whole conversation. He said he had a gold coin, saved for the winter. He said he would lend it to them. Interest-free, no deadline. Do Hwan started to object. Park Tae-seon cut him off. He said he was alive, that his hands were clean, that he'd received a letter from his wife yesterday. She'd found out he was well. She was coming back, with the children. He said the gold wasn't a loan, it was a debt, one he'd never be able to repay, and didn't want to. 2 more men stepped out of the darkness, fishermen from among the first to be healed, each with a handful of silver. We'll chip in, all together, as much as it takes. Tell us how much. Do Hwan sat on the porch and said nothing. He looked at these people. Fishermen, poor, barely making ends meet, and they're bringing him their money. Not because he asked, because he cured them. And because if his kitchen closes, the next patients will die. This isn't charity. It's an investment in their own survival. The fisherman understood this better than any financier. Do Hwan took the money, said he'd pay it back, every last penny. Park Tae-seon waved his hand, said he'd better go make some more broth. They laughed, all of them, for the first time. On the porch of a small eatery in a town that, just a month ago, had been quietly dying. Laughter. Yoon-ara didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Once. Do Hwan stood up. He said he'd go to Soho tomorrow, on Park Tae-seon's boat. He'd get his license. He'd be back by evening. Sorin and Hana would work without him. The broths don't heal without his touch, but Sorin can make the regular ones, hot, filling, nutritious. The city would survive one day without the healing bowls. Yoon-ara said she would go with him. Do Hwan looked at her. He said the kitchen needed to be guarded. Yoon-ara replied that there would be no one to guard the kitchen if he were killed on the way, and that she wouldn't leave him alone in Soho, where Hansol surely had people. Do Hwan thought about it. She was right. Again. Park Tae-seon's boat left Phado port at dawn. The wind was favorable. The sail was taut. Do Hwan sat at the bow and looked out at the sea. The water was dark, greenish-gray. It smelled of salt and something bitter. Yun-ara sat at the stern with a spear across her knees. Park Tae-sun was at the helm. 2 hours to Soho. Do Hwan used the time. He thought. He ran through the map of problems in his head. A license is a shield, but only a legal one. A piece of paper won't stop mercenaries. It won't stop arsonists. It won't stop poisoners if Hansol decides to come in from this side. He needs more than a piece of paper. He needs a reputation that can't be ignored. He needs allies that Hansol will be afraid to touch. He needs a scale where shutting down his kitchen means declaring war on the entire coast. 1 tavern in Phado is a dot on the map. 10 taverns from Phado to Yeoncheon are a line of defense. Soho appeared an hour and a half later. Larger than Phado, twice as large. 2-story stone houses, a real port with docks and cranes, a market with 3 rows of stalls, and a cook's guild sign above a 2-story building near the central square. Do Hwan and Yun-ara went ashore. Park Tae-sun stayed with the boat. They agreed that he would wait until sunset. The Soho Cooks Guild was small. 3 rooms, a reception area with a counter, an exam hall, a kitchen for testing skills. A guild official sat behind the desk, fat, bald, bored. He looked down at Do Hwan, looked at his clothes, simple, work clothes, stained with fish broth. He looked at Yun-ara behind him, a spear, a scar. Unusual company for a chef. Do Hwan gave his name, submitted his application, paid the fee. 5 gold coins clattered onto the counter. The official counted them, filled out the paperwork, said the exam was in an hour, said he had to prepare 1 dish, any dish, using the provided ingredients. 3 experts would evaluate the taste and technique. The passing score was 60 out of 100. Do Hwan nodded. An hour of waiting. Yun-ara stood by the wall, silent, looking around. She was assessing, a scout's habit. Do Hwan sat down on a bench. He closed his eyes. He wasn't meditating. He was thinking about the recipe. The ingredients would be simple. Guild cuisine is standard. Fish, vegetables, grains, spices, oil. He could make broth. He could fry fish. He could make porridge. But he didn't just need a passing grade. He needed a perfect score. He needed the experts to remember his name. He needed the word to spread throughout the guild, so that when Hansol tried to exert pressure through the guild officials, they would remember the cook who had prepared something unprecedented at the exam in Soho. An hour had passed. They called him. The exam kitchen. Spacious, clean, 3 stoves, a table with ingredients, fish, 2 kinds, vegetables, rice, flour, oil, salt, basic spices, and more. Bones, pork bones. They lay in the corner of the table, apparently for broth or sauce. The standard set. 3 experts sat at a table in the corner, 2 men and a woman, all in guild aprons, serious faces, bored eyes. They had seen hundreds of exams. They weren't expecting anything new. Do Hwan approached the table with the ingredients. He examined them. He touched the fish. Fresh. Good. He sniffed the bones. Pork. Young. Lots of collagen. Perfect. He knew what he was going to cook. Not broth. Not fried fish. Not porridge. He would cook something this world had never seen. Fish in a broth glaze. A technique from Earth's haute cuisine. A classic of the French school, adapted by him in Seoul to Korean ingredients. First, the broth. Pork bones in water. Boil on high heat for 3 minutes. Drain, rinse, remove the scum. Fill with clean water. Simmer on low heat. 20 minutes isn't enough for a proper broth, but it's enough for the glaze. The bones are young. The collagen will release quickly. Meanwhile, the fish. Fillet. Salt it. 3 minutes. Pat dry. Score the skin. Crisscross, thinly. Skillet, oil, heat until smoking. Place the fish skin side down. 4 minutes. Don't touch, don't move, don't flip. The skin should become crispy and golden. The experts watched. The woman leaned forward. She noticed the cuts. They don't do that here. Rice, Rinse 3 times. Cover with water, 1 part rice to 1 part water. Cook over medium heat. When the water is gone, reduce to low. 10 minutes. Perfect rice, grain by grain. The broth had thickened. The collagen had done its job. Do Hwan strained it, added a drop of vinegar, a pinch of salt, a spoonful of oil. Whisked it with quick movements. Glaze, golden, thick, shiny. Nothing like this existed in Harian. Local sauces were diluted pastes or melted butter with herbs. The concept of reducing broth into a glaze was a revolution. He flipped the fish. 2 minutes on the meat side, removed it, placed it on the rice, drizzled the glaze over it, a thin ribbon, diagonally, garnished with greens, a single leaf, in the center. The dish looked exactly like haute cuisine. Minimalism, precision, every element in its place, nothing superfluous. Do Hwan placed the plate in front of the experts. He stepped back, wiped his hands, waited. The first expert picked up the chopsticks, tasted the glazed fish, froze. The chopsticks hung in the air. His eyes widened. He slowly put the chopsticks down. He looked at the plate. He looked at Do Hwan. The second expert tasted it. The same reaction. A pause, a glance. The third expert, a woman, she tasted it. She closed her eyes, chewed slowly, opened her eyes, and for the first time during the entire exam, an expression appeared on her face that wasn't boredom. It was amazement. The glaze, a thick, silky glaze made from pork bones. It had a flavor they couldn't describe. Umami. The fifth taste, a concept that didn't exist in culinary theory in Harian. They knew sweet, salty, sour, bitter, but this deep, meaty, enveloping flavor that settled on the tongue and wouldn't go away, this flavor was new. Completely new to their world. The first expert asked what technique this was. Do Hwan replied calmly. He said it was a reduction of the broth. He explained that when bones are simmered for a long time, the protein breaks down into amino acids that impart a deep flavor. He noted that this flavor enhances the perception of all the other components of the dish. The experts exchanged glances. The second one jotted something down on a sheet of paper. The third one tasted it again. Do Hwan stood and waited. He didn't need to hear the result. He could tell by their faces. 100 out of 100, or thereabouts. The official behind the counter issued the license 20 minutes later, a parchment bearing the guild's seal. A first-class master chef's license. First class, not second, not third. First. The highest grade based on the exam results. The officials said they'd only given it out 3 times in the last 20 years. Do Hwan rolled up the parchment, put it in his bag. Yoon Ara stood by the door and watched him. Something resembling pride flashed across her face. They went out onto the street. 10 minutes to the port. Park Taesyeon is waiting. They could go home. But Do Hwan stopped. He looked around. Soho, a city twice the size of Phado, also on the coast, also a fishing town, and also ailing. He saw the gray blight on the faces of passers-by. Not as thick as in Phado a month ago, but it's here. He turned to Yoon Ara, said he needed to look at something. They walked through the city. Do Hwan was searching. An empty space, with a kitchen, with a stove, near the market or the port, in a high-traffic area. He found it on 3rd Street, an abandoned tavern, shutters closed, the door locked, but the walls were sturdy, the roof was intact. He peered through the window. It was dusty inside, but there was a stove, an old one, a stone one, in working order. He memorized the address. Not today, but soon. Phado is the beginning. Soho is the next step. They returned to the boat. They set sail, the wind in their faces, salty spray. Do Hwan sat at the bow, holding a sealed parchment in a bag. The first shield, small, but real. Yoon Ara sat at the stern. She looked at the horizon. She was silent. Then she spoke softly. She said that during the exam, she understood for the first time why he was doing this. Not broths, not medicine, food. She said that when the experts tasted his dish, their expressions changed, not because of the taste, because of the surprise that food could be like this. Something more than just food. Do Hwan didn't answer. He just nodded. They returned to Phado at sunset. So Rin was waiting at the threshold. Her face was tense. She asked one thing. "Did you get it?" Do Hwan showed her the parchment. So Rin exhaled. Her shoulders slumped. She reached out to take the paper. She stopped. She looked at the seal. First class. She looked up. Do Hwan shrugged. So Rin laughed for the first time, briefly, in a single breath, but she laughed. Day 52, morning. Do Hwan checked the jar of beans. The smell had changed, from sour to deep, earthy, with a hint of nutty. Fermentation had entered its second phase. Another 6 weeks, maybe 5. The bacteria were working properly. Proteins were breaking down into amino acids. Glutamate was accumulating. In a little over a month, he would have a paste that would turn every broth he made into a weapon 10 times more powerful than it was now. He closed the lid of the vat and returned to the kitchen. Over the past 3 weeks, Phado had changed. Old woman Kim had knocked down the wall to the adjacent room, the former storage room. Now there were 4 more tables in there, 10 tables instead of 6. She and Rin had rearranged the workspace around the stove. 2 zones, the first for preparing ingredients, the second for cooking. Between them, a counter where everything needed is within reach. Efficiency has increased, fewer steps, less time, more bowls. Hannah Park kept a notebook. Every patient is recorded. Name, diagnosis, stage, number of bowls, result. The notebook is already a third full. Documentation, evidence. If we ever have to prove that the kitchen works, here it is, in black and white. On this day, the kitchen served 36 bowls. The record was broken every week. But Do Hwan knew that was the ceiling. 1 cook, 1 stove, 1 kitchen. 36 is the physical limit, provided that each bowl is unique. There were 2 ways to increase that number. First, teach someone else to make healing broths. Impossible. The ability was unique. It required both his healer's eyes and his earthly knowledge at the same time. Second, open a second location. Travel between them himself. Cook at 1 in the morning, in the other in the evening. Double the reach, Soho. He had thought about this every day since the moment he saw the abandoned tavern. But Soho needs money. He needs a cook on site to handle the prep work. He needs logistics. He needs protection. He needs time he doesn't have. After noon, a woman walked into the tavern whom Do Hwan hadn't expected. Tall, slender, black hair pulled back into a tight bun, thin-framed glasses, a dark suit, not a Hansol uniform, civilian clothes, expensive ones, heels, in a fishing port. She looked like a creature from another world. Yoon Ada tensed instantly, hand on her spear. The woman raised both hands, empty, no weapons, no documents. She said she'd come to talk, not on Hansel's behalf, or rather, on Hansel's behalf, but not on assignment, of her own free will. Her name was Choi Min-soo, 28 years old, a former sales agent for Hansol Alchemy's Southern Division. Former, as of this morning. She sat down at the table. So Rin brought water, not broth, water, for now. Choi Min-soo spoke, calmly, without emotion, like a person who had made a decision and was now simply carrying it out step by step. She said she had worked at Hansol for 10 years, since she was 18. She started as a courier, worked her way up to regional sales agent, sold potions, all along the southern coast, personally managed 18 clients from among the small guilds and 3 city contracts, knew every figure, every markup, every scheme. She said that 3 months ago, she gained access to the Southern Branch's internal documents. By accident, the archivist mixed up the folders. She opened the wrong one and read it. A report on the side effects of the Chongsu Series B line of potions. The line was cheap, mass-produced, for poor regions, port cities, fishing villages, exactly the places where the Gray Blight was. The report contained data that had never been published. Production waste from the B series contained unstable gray mana. The waste was discharged into the ocean through the factory's outflow system in Hangpo. 50 nautical miles from Phado. The gray mana settled in the fish. The fish were eaten. People fell ill. The gray curse, man-made. Not a curse, not a natural disaster. Industrial discharge. A side effect of cheap production of cheap potions for poor people. Han Sol knew. The report was dated 4 years ago. For 4 years they knew and continued to discharge. The kitchen was quiet. So Rin stood at the stove, a knife in her hand, her knuckles white. Hannah Park sat at the table, her face pale. Her hands were folded in her lap. Yoon Ara stood by the wall. She didn't move. Her face was stony, but a vein on her temple throbbed. Old woman Kim held onto the counter. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. She had nearly died from the curse, and now she knew exactly what had nearly killed her. The fisherman in line heard every word. Park Tae-seon stood by the door, his face. Do Hwan had seen many expressions on human faces. This was the face of a man who had learned that someone had tried to kill him. Not with a knife, not with a sword, with cheap potions and rotten fish. Slowly, no noise, no traces. Do Hwan looked at Cho Min-soo, through the eyes of a healer. The woman is healthy, physically, but her mana is frayed, chaotic. Stress, insomnia, at least 3 nights. She had made the decision not to sleep for 3 nights. She had burned her bridges, quit. Or she was fired when they noticed she was copying documents. He asked if she had any proof. Chae Min-soo pulled a rolled-up parchment from the inside pocket of her jacket, a copy of the report, the seal of the Southern Branch, the directors of the director, Gu Jae-ho. Do Hwan took the parchment, unrolled it, read it. Numbers, dates, concentrations, dumping routes, everything was documented. The corporation's bureaucracy had worked against her. They had recorded every gram of poison they had dumped into the ocean, for the records. He rolled up the parchment, put it away, looked at Chae Min. He asked why she had come to him. Chae Min-soo took off her glasses, wiped them, put them back on. She said she had spent 10 years selling potions that didn't cure the curse, because the curse was caused by the very people who sold the potions. A cycle, a perfect business. Create a disease, sell a cure. The cure doesn't work, sell more. She said she didn't know, and then she found out, and she hadn't slept for 3 nights trying to decide what to do. She said she had skills, accounting, logistics, contracts, negotiations, 10 years at a corporation. She knows how the system works from the inside, knows where the weak spots are, knows who takes bribes and how much, knows the supply routes and pricing schemes. She said all of this was at Do Hwan's disposal if he was willing to take her on. Do Hwan was silent. He thought. This woman had been part of the machine that killed people in Phado for 10 years, without knowing it, but part of it. Sodin looked at her with undisguised hostility, Yoon Ara with suspicion, Hannah Park with compassion, old woman Kim with an inscrutable expression. Do Hwan stood up. He walked over to the stove. He picked up a pot, poured in water, took out the fish, began to cook. Everyone watched. Chae Min-soo, too. 20 minutes later, he placed a bowl of broth in front of her. Not medicinal, just ordinary. Hot, with fish, with ginger, with salt. She isn't sick. She doesn't need treatment for her body. She needs warmth. 3 sleepless nights, 3 nights of decisions, 3 nights of guilt she was only just beginning to realize. A bowl of hot broth won't save her from guilt. But it will say one thing. I don't blame you. Sit down. Eat. Chae Min-soo looked at the bowl, at the steam rising from the broth, at her reflection in the golden liquid. She picked up a spoon, the first sip. She ate in silence, down to the last drop. Then she set the bowl down. She said quietly that she needed a place to sleep. Old woman Kim silently pointed to the back room. Cho Min-soo nodded. She stood up. She left. A minute later, not a sound came from the back room. She fell asleep instantly, for the first time in 3 nights. Do Hwan returned to the stove. Sorin came up close. She said quietly and angrily that he had lost his mind, that this woman was from Hansol, that it could be a trap, that they didn't know her and couldn't trust her. Do Hwan stirred the broth. He didn't turn around. He said So-rin was right. They didn't know her. They couldn't trust her. Not yet. But he said one more thing. He said that So-rin had come to him in the kitchen, hungry and penniless, and he hadn't checked her background. He hadn't asked for references. He hadn't demanded guarantees. He'd simply put her next to him at the day. So-rin fell silent. She turned away. She picked up a knife. She began cutting the seaweed, furiously, precisely, vindictively, but silently. She didn't agree, but she accepted it, for now. That evening, Do Hwan sat alone on the porch. In his hand, a rolled-up parchment bearing the Hansol seal. Proof, real, documentary, but useless on its own. Take it to the provincial court. The judge is on the take. Take it to the governor. The governor receives donations from Hansol every quarter. Take it to the capital, to the royal council. Perhaps, but that requires access. He needs someone who knows how the palace bureaucracy works. Someone who has been navigating the system for 10 years and knows all the doors and all the keys. Cho Min-soo. She's not just a defector. She's the key to a lock he didn't have. Do Hwan put the parchment away. He looked out at the sea, dark, quiet. Somewhere down there, gray smog from the factory chimneys in Hangpo settles. Every day, every hour. While he heals people, bowl by bowl, the corporation continues to poison them. He treats the symptom. The cause remains untouched. To eliminate the cause, he needs to destroy the machine. And to destroy the machine, he needs to know how it works. Now he knew. He went inside, lay down on the bench, closed his eyes. The list in his head grew longer. He has a license. Supplies are secured. The team is growing. The evidence is in hand. The next step. Soho. A second base. Expanding the line of defense and preparing for a war he hadn't started but wasn't about to run from. Day 61. Do Hwan stood on the deck of Park Tae-sun's schooner, watching the port of Soho approach. Yoon Ara was beside him. Behind him were 2 sacks of spices and a bundle of pots. Chae Min-soo had stayed in Phado. 3 days ago, she spread a map of the southern coast on the table and pointed her finger at Soho. She said that Hansol had no permanent office in that city, just a traveling agent who came once a month. She said that rent was cheap because half the retail space stood empty after the Heroes Guild left the region. She said that if we acted quickly, we could get a foothold before the corporation realized what was happening. Do Hwan listened and nodded. Chae Min-soo had been working for 4 days and had already changed everything. She had audited the kitchen's finances in an hour. She found 3 expense categories that could be cut in half. She reorganized spice procurement. Instead of weekly small batches, she proposed a monthly bulk order through a trading house in Yeoncheon, 40% cheaper. So-rin watched her in silence, with suspicion, but also with reluctant respect.
Choi Min-soo calculated faster than So-rin could cut fish, and So-rin cut fish very quickly. The abandoned tavern in Soho stood where it was. Do Hwan found the owner, an old man named Oh Dae-soo, a former innkeeper. He closed up shop 2 years ago when the Heroes Guild left. No heroes, no customers. No customers, no point. He asked for 3 gold coins for 6 months' rent. Through a letter, Choi Min-soo haggled the price down to 2.5. Do Hwan paid from the Taepo Common Fund. The fund held up 400 bowls worth of copper coins, plus voluntary contributions from the healed fishermen, plus savings from bulk purchases. It was enough. Just barely. They entered the tavern. Dust, cobwebs, the smell of dampness. But the walls were sturdy. The stove was stone. It worked. Yoon Ara checked the doors and windows. The bolts were in place. The roof didn't leak. Acceptable. Do Hwan stood by the stove. He placed his hand on the stone. Warm from the sun streaming through the window. A second kitchen. He looked around. 8 tables. A large hall. A back room. A room upstairs. More space than in Taepo.
But he needed someone here, someone who would handle the prep work, clean the fish,
Chop the seaweed, watch the stove, cook simple broths for those who don't need treatment but just need a hot meal. Do Hwan would come from Phado by boat. In the morning, he'd prepare the medicinal bowls in Tay Pho. In the afternoon, he'd sail to Soho. In the evening, he'd cook here. Return at night. A crazy schedule, but doable. If Soho has its own chef in training, he'd been thinking about it for 3 days, and the solution came from where he least expected it, from Rin. She said it last night. She said it calmly, no drama. She said she would go to Soho. She said she could run the kitchen herself. Prep, regular broths, service, everything except the medicinal bowls. Before Hwan could object, So Rin cut him off. She said that at Phado, Han Park could take over the sorting and prep. So Jun had grown enough to clean fish without supervision. Old Lady Kim was handling the finances. Yoon Ara was on security. The kitchen at Phado would manage without So Rin. But in Sohu, no one could manage without her. Do Hwan was silent. So Rin stood before him. Her back was straight, her chin was lifted, her eyes were steady, not a trace of uncertainty. This was not the girl who had come a month ago begging to be a dishwasher. This was a chef, the second in command, his right-hand woman. She was ready. Do Hwan said he agreed, so Rin nodded. Once. She turned around. She went to pack her things, and now he was standing in the empty tavern in Soho, knowing that So Rin would arrive here tomorrow morning, alone, and she would begin. Yoon Ara helped unload the pots. They arranged the spices. They washed the floors. They wiped down the tables. Do Hwan lit the stove. He checked the draft. Good. Better than in Tay Pho. The stone retains the heat more evenly. He cooked a test broth, tasted it. The water in Soho is softer than in Phado. He'd need to adjust the salt. A little more, and a little less seaweed. Since there are fewer minerals in the water, the seaweed would be too strong. He made a mental note. He'd tell So Rin. In the evening, they returned to Phado. So Rin was waiting at the pier, with a bag on her back. So Jun was beside her. The boy was holding his sister's sleeve. He didn't want to let go. So Rin crouched down in front of him. She said something quietly. So Jun nodded. He let go of her sleeve. He wiped his eyes with his fist. He turned around and ran toward the tavern. So Rin stood up straight. She looked at Do Hwan. He handed her the key to the tavern. So Rin took it, clenched it in her fist, turned toward the boat. Park Taeseon would take her to Soho in the morning. Do Hwan watched her leave, a small figure with a sack on her back. For a second, he saw himself, a month ago, with the same sack, on the road to Phado. The difference was that she wasn't alone. She had the kitchen behind her. She had the team behind her. She had him behind her. The next day, So Rin opened the doors of the tavern in Soho. No sign, no name. She simply opened the doors and set a pot of broth on the porch. Ordinary, hot, free. By the evening of the first day, 3 streets knew about her. By the end of the week, the entire port district. The 3rd month. Do Hwan hadn't slept more than 4 hours a day. Morning in Phado, healing bowls until noon. A boat to Soho. Healing bowls until sunset. A boat back. 4 hours of sleep. Repeat. His body could handle it. An SS rank healer's physical endurance was greater than that of an ordinary person. But even SS rank isn't infinite. So Rin saw it. Every time he walked into the Soho kitchen, she looked at his face. She counted the shadows under his eyes. She counted the seconds he stood at the stove before starting to cut. She counted the pauses between movements that hadn't been there before. She didn't say anything, but one evening, after he finished his last meal, she set a plate in front of him. Not broth, rice, fried fish, vegetables, simple food, cooked by her, for him. Do Hwan looked at the plate. He looked at So Rin. She wasn't looking at him. She was wiping down the counter. He ate, silently. The food was good. Not medicinal, just good. Warm, just right. With that touch of care that can't be spooned up but is felt on the tongue. So Rin had grown up. In a month in Soho, she had become a different person. Not in technique. The technique had been there from the start. She had changed in her understanding. She had begun to see people, not as orders, as people. The fisherman who comes every day and sits by the window. The woman with 2 children who always asks for a second helping for the youngest.
The old man who comes not to eat, but to sit in the warmth because it's cold at home. So Rin remembered everyone. She didn't write them down like Hana. She remembered them with her heart, and her broths became different. Not medicinal, but alive, with a warmth that can't be measured by magical scanners. Meanwhile, Hansol was silent. 2 months of silence. Nothing after the inspection. Cho Min-soo said it was a bad sign. She said that when Hansol is silent for 2 months, it means they're preparing something big. Not an agent, not an inspector. Something at the provincial government level or higher. She turned out to be right. On the 78th day, a messenger arrived in Phado, an official one, in the uniform of the Royal Mail Service. He brought an envelope bearing the seal of the provincial magistrate, addressed to the owner of the Taeho establishment, Jeong Do Hwan. Do Hwan opened the envelope. A decree. The magistrate of the southern province orders the suspension of operations at the Tefo restaurant in the city of Phado and the affiliated establishment in the city of Soho until the completion of an investigation into a complaint by the Hansol Alchemy Corporation regarding the illegal use of unlicensed healing practices disguised as culinary activities. The deadline for compliance is 7 days. Do Hwan read it twice. He put it on the table. Cho Min-soo picked it up. She read it. She took off her glasses. She wiped them. She put them back on. She said the wording was tricky. The complaint isn't about the food. It was a complaint about healing. He has a chef's license, but he doesn't have a healer's license. And if his food heals, then that's healing, and then a chef's license doesn't protect him. A trap. A legal one. Do Hwan sat down. He thought. So Rin stood nearby. She had arrived that morning from Soho when Park Tae-seon delivered the news. Yoon Ara at the door, Hana Park at the table, old woman Kim behind the counter. Everyone was silent, waiting. Do Hwan raised his head. He looked at Cho Min-soo. He asked if an appeal was possible. Cho Min-soo said it was, but the appeal goes through the provincial court. The judge receives money from Hansol. The decision is predictable. There is a second option, appealing directly to the Royal Council, bypassing the province. But this requires a reason of extreme importance, an epidemic, a threat to the population's lives, a crime against the state.
Do Hwan pulled a rolled-up parchment from his bosom. Hansol's report on waste dumping. 4 years of deliberate poisoning of the coast. Hundreds of sick people. Dozens of dead. This isn't just a complaint. It's a state crime. Choi Min-soo nodded. She said this was enough to appeal to the council, but the document had to be delivered in person. We needed someone who could enter the palace and place the paper on the council table, not through the mail. The mail would be intercepted, not through officials. The officials were bought off. Personally, directly. Do Hwan asked who could do it. Choi Min-soo paused. She said she knew one person in the council's office, a junior secretary. Honest, not wealthy. She'd been selling him headache potions at a discount for 3 years. He owed her a favor. Not money, attention. 5 minutes of attention to slip the parchment into the stack of incoming council documents. That will be enough. The contents will do the rest. Do Hwan nodded. He said she needed to go to the capital. Right now. Choi Min-soo stood up. She said she needed money for the trip, and a suit, a decent one. They won't let you into the palace in dusty boots. Old woman Kim silently opened the jar of coins. She poured them out onto the table. So Rin added hers. Yoon Ara placed the last silver coin. Hana Park took a small medallion from around her neck, a silver one, a temple medallion, her only valuable possession. She placed it on the table. Cho Min-soo looked at the medallion. She looked at Hana. She said it wasn't necessary. Hana said it was. Cho Min-soo took it. She put it in her pocket. Not the locket, the money. She returned the locket. She said it wasn't for sale. Do Hwan walked her to the port. Park Tae-seon would drive her to Soho. From there, a coastal vessel to Yeoncheon. From Yeoncheon, a stagecoach to the capital. 4 days, maybe 5. They had 7 days until closing. Cho Min-soo stood on the deck. The wind ruffled her hair. Her glasses glinted in the sun. She said she would return. Do Hwan replied that he knew. The boat pulled away from the dock. Do Hwan returned to the kitchen. 7 days. He would cook every single one of them, until the very last. If they closed the kitchen, he would open it again. If they sealed the doors, he would cook on the street. If they banned cooking, he would hand out raw fish and teach people to cook for themselves. Hansol could close the door, but he couldn't shut the mouths of every fisherman who knew that sardine broth had saved his life. 5 days, 6. On the 7th day, a second messenger arrived. Royal mail again, another sealed envelope, but a different seal. Not the provincial magistrate, the royal council. Do Hwan opened it. He read it. The provincial magistrate's order to suspend operations at the Taefo establishment has been revoked by a decision of the Royal Council pending the completion of a separate investigation into allegations that Hansol Alchemy Corporation intentionally polluted coastal waters. The Taefo establishment is permitted to continue operations. Additionally, the Royal Council is sending an investigative commission to the southern province to verify the facts set forth in the petition. The commission will arrive within 2 weeks. Do Hwan placed the paper on the table. His hands trembled slightly. For the first time in 3 months, not out of fear, out of relief. Old woman Kim read over his shoulder, slowly, syllable by syllable. She sat down on a chair and covered her face with her hands. So-rin stood by the stove, a knife in her hand. She wasn't crying. She was smiling. Widely, openly, unguarded. Yunara leaned against the wall. She exhaled, closed her eyes, opened them. Hana Park folded her hands, whispered something, a prayer, or a thanksgiving, or both. Do Hwan hung the decree on the wall behind the counter, next to his first-class master chef's license. 2 plaques, one from the guild, one from the king. He turned to the stove, said it was next. The 4th month, the fermented paste was ready. Do Hwan opened the jar in the morning and froze. The smell, deep, dark, complex, umami in its purest form. He scooped some up with a spoon, tasted it with the tip of his tongue. He closed his eyes. Yes, that's it. Thick, slightly salty, with a long aftertaste that doesn't fade but unfolds in layers. Earthly masters of fermentation spent millennia perfecting this process. He managed it in 3 months, because mana accelerated the bacteria's work, because the beans in this world were richer in protein, and because he knew exactly what he was looking for. Do Hwan added the paste to his morning broth. 1/4 of a spoon, no more was needed. The paste was potent. The first patient of the day, a woman with severe corruption in both lungs. She had been coming to him for a month. 8 bowls. The corruption was receding slowly. It had taken root too deeply. The woman ate. The first sip. She paused. She lowered her spoon. She looked at the bowl. She looked at Do Hwan. Something had changed. She couldn't say what, but her body could feel it. The taste was deeper, warmer, richer, as if the broth had become 3-dimensional. She finished eating. Do Hwan watched with the eyes of a healer. The mana in the broth with the paste worked differently. It didn't just dissolve the gray clots, it penetrated them. It broke them down from the inside. Amino acids from the fermented beans bonded with the stagnant mana at the molecular level. Absorption increased not just 2-fold, in 5, maybe 6. The gray spot on the woman's neck faded in 3 minutes. 10 minutes later, it was gone. She pressed her hand to her throat. She was breathing, deeply, freely. For the first time in a year, she was crying and laughing at the same time. Hannah Park jotted it down in her notebook. 9th bowl. Complete healing. Note: fermented paste added. Effect significantly enhanced. Do Hwan stood at the stove and realized that everything had changed. With this paste, he could treat severe cases in 1 or 2 bowls instead of 5 or 7. Mild cases in a single sip. The speed would triple. No, it would increase 5-fold. If he used to be able to heal 36 people a day, Now he'll be able to treat 60, 70. The ceiling had shifted. So Rin arrived from Soho 2 days later. He let her try the paste. She put a spoonful in her mouth, froze, stood with her eyes closed for 30 seconds. She opened them. She looked at Do Hwan. She said one word. How? Do Hwan explained. Fermentation. Bacteria, proteins, amino acids. Time. So Rin listened. An expression he knew well appeared on her face. Hunger. Not physical, professional. The hunger of a chef who sees a new horizon. She asked if she could make her own batch. In Soho, from the same beans. Do Hwan nodded. He demonstrated the process. Every step. Soaking, boiling, salting, temperature, humidity, time. So Rin took notes. It was the first time he'd seen her with a notebook. She'd never written down his broth recipes. She memorized them. But for the fermentation, she wrote down every detail. She understood the scale of it. Meanwhile, an investigative commission arrived in the southern province. 5 people, 3 officials, 1 diagnostic magician, 1 royal court healer. They started with the factory in Hengpo. Che Min-soo accompanied them. She returned from the capital 5 kilograms lighter, with dark circles under her eyes, but with the papers, all the necessary permits, all the seals, all the signatures. The corporation tried to block them, tried to bribe them, tried to intimidate them. Che Min-soo knew their every move. 10 years inside the system, she anticipated their moves 3 steps ahead, like a chess player who knows the opponent's pieces because he set them up himself. The commission inspected the factory for 3 days. The diagnostic mage scanned the pipes. The royal court healer took water samples. Officials questioned the workers. On the 4th day, they found it. A reservoir, underground. Beneath the factory's east wing, 200 barrels of gray liquid. Waste from the production of Series B potions. The diagnostic mage measured the concentration. He turned pale. He showed the numbers to the head of the commission. The head of the commission read them. He sat down on the nearest rock. He cursed under his breath. The concentration of gray manna in the waste was 40 times the permissible limit for any discharge. 40 times. Not 2, not 5, 40. Gu Jae-ho, director of the southern branch, was summoned for questioning that same day. Choi Min-soo relayed the details through Park Tae-song. She said that Gu Jae-ho had come to the interrogation in a perfect suit, with a perfect smile. He spoke calmly. He denied everything. He said that the waste had been disposed of in accordance with protocol. He said that the tank was not his responsibility. He said that the workers had acted on their own initiative. The commission presented a document, that very one, with his signature, the discharge order, from 4 years ago. Gu Jae-ho looked at his signature. The smile didn't fade, but his eyes changed, like a man who stepped onto thin ice and heard it crack. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. Do Hwan received the news a day late. He cooked. He treated patients. Every bowl now contained porridge. The line in Phado had grown shorter, not because there were fewer people, because he was treating them faster. The severely ill left after 2 bowls, the mildly ill after 1. The Gray Plague was retreating throughout the city. Fewer than 40 patients remained in Phado. A month ago, there had been 150. At the end of the 4th month, news arrived. The factory in Hengpo had been sealed off. Production of Series B had been halted. Gu Jae-ho had been suspended from his post pending the conclusion of the investigation. The accounts of Hansal's southern branch had been frozen. Do Hwan heard this in the kitchen. He was standing at the stove, stirring the broth. He nodded. He kept stirring. He didn't celebrate. The factory was shut down, but the pipes had been there for 15 years. The gray manna in the ocean wouldn't disappear in a day. The fish will remain contaminated for a long time. People will remain sick for a long time. He still has a long time to cook. He added a pinch of paste to the broth and called the next person. A year. 365 days since that morning when he opened his eyes on the stone floor of the temple. Do Hwan stood at the threshold of Taepo and looked at Phado. The city had changed, unrecognizable. The boarded-up houses were open, The streetlights were on. People were in the streets, healthy, noisy, alive. The market was fully operational, all 10 stalls. Fish, vegetables, spices, fabrics, tools. The merchants had returned. The fishermen's families had returned. Park Tae-sun's wife brought the children 4 months ago. 2 boys, noisy, running around the port. Park Tae-sun smiles constantly. Do Hwan had completely cured the Gray Plague in Phado. 0 patients. Every resident of the city had passed through his kitchen. Everyone had eaten his broth. Everyone was healthy. In Soho, So-rin brought the kitchen up to the same standard, 22 bowls a day. Do Hwan came 3 times a week for the severe cases. The pasta was enough. So-rin had grown into a master. Her regular broths didn't have magical healing powers, but they were so good that people came just for the taste, for the warmth, for the feeling that someone cared. She understood what Do Hwan had taught her from day one. Food isn't a recipe. Food is a person. There were now 5 taverns, Phado, Soho, Yeonchun, 2 fishing villages in between. Each was run by someone trained by So-rin, chefs she had found and nurtured, not like her, but good enough for everyday cooking. Only Do Hwan could still make the healing bowls, but the regular broths with noodles provided enough of a supportive effect to keep the curse from returning. Liel appeared in the 3rd month. Do Hwan remembered that morning, 5 o'clock, dawn. He went out to the pier to check the morning catch. A creature was sitting at the edge of the pier. A girl, or not quite a girl, skin with a bluish tint, long hair, wet, the color of sea foam, eyes enormous, dark blue, without pupils. Instead of legs, a tail extended from her hips down, long, silvery, with translucent fins. A mermaid. She was sitting at the edge of the pier, holding a clay pot in her hands, the very one Do Hwan had been leaving every morning, since the 1st week. He had been leaving a small pot of hot broth on the pier, not for anyone in particular. He just felt that someone was down there, in the water, watching, listening, sniffing. Every morning the pot would disappear. Every morning a fish lay in its place, fresh, so fresh you couldn't catch it with a net, an underwater catch. Liel looked at him. He looked at her. She spoke first. In broken human, she said his food didn't smell like the rest of the humans' food. She said she'd been swimming off the shore for 3 months, sniffing the smells from his kitchen. She said she couldn't stand it anymore. She said that in her clan, it was forbidden to approach people, that she had already been banished for saving a drowning fisherman 2 years ago. She said she had nowhere to go, that the ocean was cold and empty, but his kitchen smelled of warmth. Do Hwan sat down next to her on the edge of the pier. He lifted the lid off the pot. Today's broth, with noodles, with ginger, with fish. He held it out to her. Liel took it. She sniffed it. Her eyes widened. She had never eaten cooked food. 60 years of raw fish. The first sip of hot broth. She froze. She lowered the pot, opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She said one word, more. Do Hwan laughed. For the first time in 3 months, Liel became part of the kitchen. Not right away, gradually. She couldn't work in the dining room, her tail, but she could do what no one else could. She dived in the harbor and brought back fish, the freshest, from the depths. Species that fishermen didn't catch because their nets couldn't reach them. Fish from the depths were cleaner, less gray mana, better for broths. Liel brought in the catch at dawn, laid it out on the pier. Do Hwan picked it up. She sat and waited for her little pot. Then she learned to sit on a chair. Then she learned to eat with spoons. Then she tried fried potatoes. So Rin fried some for her to try. Liel ate 3 servings. She demanded them for breakfast, and for lunch, and for dinner. So Rin tried to explain that potatoes 3 times a day wasn't a balanced diet. Liel wouldn't listen. She wanted potatoes. Do Hwan gave his permission. Potatoes for breakfast, broth for lunch, potatoes for dinner. A compromise. Liel agreed reluctantly. Now, a year later, she sat in her usual spot by the window overlooking the sea. Her tail was hidden under a long skirt. Her hair was dry and tied back. She could almost pass for a human. Almost. If you didn't look into her pupilless eyes. Amy Carter showed up in her 6th month. The daughter of a merchant ship captain from a distant continent. Red-haired, freckled, 19 years old. Her father's ship had been caught in a storm off the southern coast. The crew was infected with the curse from the water. Do Hwan went out to sea on Pak Tae Sun's schooner with pots of broth. He fed the sailors right on board, 20 men, over 2 days. The captain didn't die from the curse, from wounds sustained in the storm. Amy was left alone, with the ship, with the crew, without a father. Do Hwan brought her to Tepo. He fed her. He gave her a room. A week later, she said she wanted to work, not in the kitchen, at sea. She's a captain. She knows how to sail a ship. She needs a ship. Do Hwan gave her a ship, or rather, he gave her money to repair her own ship from the Tepo treasury. Che Min-soo processed it as an investment. Amy's ship became the first vessel in the Tepo fleet. Fish deliveries along the coast, spices from distant ports, a link between the 5 taverns. Amy sailed the route once a week. She returned to Phado. She had dinner in Tepo. Every time, Do Hwan set a plate in front of her. Every time, she ate as if she hadn't eaten in a week. And every time, she looked at him as if he were a lighthouse. A year. 6 women around him. So-rin at the stove. Yunara at the door. Liel at the window. Hannah Park at the table with a notebook. Che Min-soo behind the counter with documents. Amy at the port with the ship. And old woman Kume in the back room, scolding the young cooks for dirty pots. A family. Strange. Impossible. Real. And on this day, they arrived. Do Hwan sensed them before he saw them. Mana. Familiar. 4 sources. Powerful. Approaching from the northern road. He stepped out onto the threshold. 4 people were walking down the street toward Tepo. A swordsman. A mage. An archer. A priestess. His former team. Without armor. Without weapons. In ordinary travel clothes. They walked in silence. Not in step. Each on their own. Like people who didn't come together but arrived at the same time. Yoon Ara stood next to Do Hwan, hand on his spear. Do Hwan shook his head. No need. The swordsman stopped 3 steps from the threshold. A year ago, he had read a letter of dismissal. Now he stood in front of a small tavern and looked at the line of 30 people stretching around the corner. He saw the sign. Tefo. He saw the people. Healthy. Smiling. Standing in line for a bowl from the man he had thrown out a year ago. The swordsman didn't look up. The mage was silent. The archer looked away. The priestess looked straight at Do Hwan. For the first time, out of the 4, with something that might have been remorse. Do Hwan looked at them, for a long time, calmly. Then he said that if they had come to eat, the end of the line was around the corner. The swordsman nodded, silently. They joined the end of the line, 30 people ahead of them. Do Hwan returned to the kitchen. So-rin was standing at the stove. She looked at him. She had seen who had come in. She knew the story. Do Hwan told her everything was fine. So Rin nodded. She didn't believe him, but she nodded. They stood in line for 2 hours, patiently, silently. The fishermen around them didn't know who they were. They didn't recognize them. The former heroes in ordinary clothes were just people, no different from the rest. By evening, the swordsman reached the counter. He held out a copper coin. He said, without looking up, 1 bowl, anyone, at the cook's discretion. Do Hwan took the coin. He went silently into the kitchen. 20 minutes. He cooked for the swordsman. Not a medicinal broth. The swordsman is healthy, strong. His mana is boiling. An SS swordsman. He doesn't need medicine. He needs something else. A broth for fatigue. Rich, warm. Bone broth, with noodles, with a spoonful of honey. Honey is about forgiveness, about gentleness, about the fact that the world doesn't have to be harsh. Do Hwan brought out the bowl, set it in front of the swordsman, said calmly that it was broth for fatigue, said that the swordsman looked tired, said to eat while it was hot. The swordsman took a spoon. First sip. He froze. The spoon froze at his mouth. A second sip. A third. He ate. And he cried. Quietly. Like old woman Kim a year ago. Tears into the bowl. Behind him, the mage, the archer, the priestess. All three watched. The mage turned away. The archer bit her lip. The priestess cried along with the swordsman. So Rin stood behind the counter, a towel in her hands. She leaned toward Do Hwan, whispering so only he could hear. She said the fish was running out. They'd need more tomorrow. Do Hwan smiled. He didn't turn toward the dining room. He replied quietly, "So tomorrow we'll go catch some more. And the day after tomorrow. And for the rest of our lives."
Outside the window, the sun was setting over the port of Phado. 300 people in a day, a record, which tomorrow would become just another Tuesday. 2 years. Phado is unrecognizable. The city has quadrupled in size, 12,000 residents, and new ones arrive every month. The port has been expanded, 3 new piers, merchant ships call daily. The market spans 2 blocks. There is no gray haze over the rooftops. It has vanished, completely. The ocean is slowly clearing. The factory in Hang Pho has been shut down for good. The smokestacks have been dismantled. The tanks have been destroyed. Gu Jae-ho has been convicted by the royal court. 10 years of hard labor, confiscation of property. Hansol Alchemy Corporation has been dissolved by royal decree. Assets have been distributed among the affected regions. The southern province received a recovery fund. The money went to hospitals, schools, roads, ports. Choi Min-soo managed the distribution. Her knowledge of corporate finance proved invaluable for the recovery process. She knew where the money had gone. She knew where to return it. The Taefo chain grew to 12 taverns along the southern coast, each with a trained chef, each with fermented paste, each with free bowls for children in the mornings. So Rin trained 14 chefs personally. She selected each one herself. She vetted each one. She gave each one a month in her kitchen in Soho before letting them go. Her standard became the chain's standard. High, uncompromising, but humane. She no longer beat her wrists for mistakes, nor did she allow others to beat her. Yoon Ara created the Tepo Security Service. 20 former soldiers, discharged, wounded, those the army had rejected. She fed them, healed them, gave them work. They guarded the taverns, caravans carrying supplies, Emmy's ships. Not for money, for food, for shelter, for belonging to something that had meaning. Yoon Ara stood before the ranks every morning, upright, with a spear, a scar across her eyebrow. They listened to her as one listens to a person who knows the price of loss and will not let it happen again. Hannah Park opened an orphanage under Tae-ho, for orphans, 23 children. That very first boy who came in the winter with blue lips. He's grown up. He's 11. He helps in the kitchen, chops vegetables, carries bowls. Every morning he gets up before everyone else. Do Hwan once asked him why so early. The boy replied that he wanted to be sure the kitchen was open, that it was real, that he wouldn't wake up and find it gone. Do Hwan sat down in front of him. He said what he had said the first time, that he would be here every day, for as long as the boy lives. The boy nodded. He didn't cry. He doesn't cry anymore. He knows it's true. Liel brought fish every dawn. Her catch became a legend along the coast. Fish from the depths, species the fishermen had never seen. Clean, fresh, filled with mana. Liel learned to speak human with almost no accent. She learned to sit at the table without dropping her chopsticks. She learned to laugh, loudly and openly. She still demanded fried potatoes 3 times a day. So Rin stopped arguing. She just fried them. Amy Carter commanded a fleet of 7 schooners. Her ships sailed from Phado to the northern ports and back. Fish, spices, beans, salt, letters, news. She had tied the coast into a single network, small, but alive. When she returned to the port of Phado and climbed the steps of Tapo Do, Hwan would set a plate before her.
Always. Every time. She ate and told stories about the sea, about storms, about the dolphins that escorted her ship, about sunsets on the open water. Her father thought she was weak. She proved him wrong, not to him. He died without ever knowing, to herself. The Royal Council sent an invitation, an official one, for a meeting on reforming the alchemy industry. The presence of Master Chef Jeong Do Hwan was strongly recommended. Cho Min-so prepared the documents, travel papers, a pass to the palace, a list of the Southern Coast's representatives' powers. She worked for 3 nights. Do Hwan told her she didn't need to overwork herself. Cho Min-so looked at him over her glasses. She said she'd been working herself to the bone for 10 years for the sake of those who tormented people. Now she's working herself to the bone for the sake of those who heal them. The difference is significant. She'll sleep when she retires. Do Hwan didn't argue. Do Hwan was traveling to the capital for the first time. Cho Min-so was with him, and So Rin. He had asked her, not as an assistant, as an equal. So Rin packed in silence. She gathered her things. She put on a clean apron, her own, not the guild's, her own, with a turmeric stain on the sleeve. She wasn't going to change for the palace. The Royal Council was in session in the Great Hall. A long table, 20 chairs, ministers, generals, guild leaders. In the center of the table, King Minho. Not young, tired, with attentive eyes. Do Hwan entered the hall in his chef's apron, with a towel over his shoulder. Choi Min-so behind his left shoulder in a black suit and glasses. So Rin behind his right in a turmeric-stained apron. The counselors watched, some with curiosity, some with irritation. A chef in the throne room? Unheard of. Do Hwan did not give a speech. He did not present documents. He did not argue his case. He placed a small clay bowl on the table before the king. Broth, that very one. Fish, seaweed, ginger, paste, salt. The bowl he used to set before the fishermen in Phado, before the orphans, before the old woman Kim, before the swordsman who wept. The same bowl, the same recipe, the same copper coin worth the ingredients. Next to it, he placed a second bowl, empty, and he put a fish in it, raw, caught off the coast of Hengpo, near the former Hansol factory. The fish was gray. Mana had solidified inside it into a thick, lifeless layer. Even an untrained person could see the difference. A golden, clear broth in one bowl, gray, dead fish in the other. Do Hwan said the broth was worth a single copper coin. He said the fish was free. They throw it away because no one wants to eat it. He said that with the right preparation, this fish could be used to make that very broth, the one that cures the gray curse, which costs a copper coin, which has saved more than 1,000 people in a year. He said that the cure for the curse costs 300 gold coins. It doesn't work. It's made from waste that causes the very same curse, a vicious cycle. The disease is created by those who sell the cure. The cure doesn't work. The disease continues. Money flows. People are dying. And so it has been for 4 years. The hall was silent. The king looked at the bowl of broth, at the gray fish, at the cook in his apron, at the woman in glasses who was silently laying out documents on the table. Seals, signatures, numbers, dumping routes, dates, names. The king picked up a spoon. He tasted the broth. 1 sip. He set down the spoon, closed his eyes for a second, opened them, looked at Do Hwan, asked what he needed. Do Hwan answered, said he needed a law. One law, a simple one. Every resident of the kingdom has the right to a plate of hot food at a fair price. Not for free, for a copper coin, but real food, made from real ingredients, prepared for people, not for profit. He said that this requires a system, testing food for mana contamination, monitoring dumping, independent suppliers, protecting small producers from corporations, and culinary schools. Not academies for the elite, schools for everyone, where any boy from the market can learn to cook the broth that will save his mother. The council met for 4 hours after his speech. Do Hwan and Soden waited in the hallway, on a stone bench. Soden sat in silence. Then she spoke softly. She said that when he placed the bowl before the king, she understood one thing. She understood why she had come to him that first day. Not for work, not for shelter, for the belief that a chef's hands can change the world. That the kitchen isn't a service department, not the back alleys, not a place for those who've been cast out from everywhere. The kitchen is the center of everything. Do Hwan looked at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her hands. Hands with burns from oil, with calluses from the knife, with yellow spots of turmeric under her fingernails. A chef's hands. Do Hwan covered her hand with his, for a second, then withdrew it. So Rin didn't move, but the corner of her mouth twitched. The council had reached a decision. The Food Safety and Coastal Waters Protection Act, the first in the kingdom's history. The Right to Food Act, the first on the continent, and a certificate. To Master Chef Jeong Do Hwan, the status of Royal Food Advisor, with voting rights on the council. Do Hwan took the certificate. He rolled it up, put it in a bag, next to the little bag of spices. They returned to Phado 3 days later. Morning. Dawn. The boat entered the harbor. Do Hwan went ashore. He walked to Tepo, a small eatery with a crooked sign. 10 tables. A wood-burning stove. Old woman Kim behind the counter. She's scolding the young cook for overcooking the onions. Yoon Ara by the door, calm, upright. Her hand isn't on her spear. She's just standing there. Lee El is at a table by the window, chewing on a potato, looking out at the sea. Hannah Park with a notebook, writing things down, counting, planning. Amy runs in from the port, her hair tousled by the wind. Her freckles are glowing. She shouts that she's brought a fresh batch of beans from the northern port. Cho Min-soo is sitting behind the counter, glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He's going through the accounts. He doesn't look up, but the corner of his mouth is slightly turned up. So-rin stands at the stove, apron tied, knife in hand, seaweed cut into squares, her way. She turns toward him, doesn't smile. No need. Her eyes speak. They say it all. She nods toward the stove. The stove is on. The pot is waiting. The broth won't cook itself. Do Hwan slings a towel over his shoulder. He walks behind the counter. He stands next to So-rin, his hand on the fish, the knife on the cutting board. There's a line at the door, just like yesterday, just like tomorrow, just like always. First in line is a fisherman, a newcomer, a stranger, with a gray spot on his wrist. He came from a distant village, a 3-day journey. He's heard of Tepo. He holds out a copper coin, one, with a trembling hand. Do Hwan takes the coin. He places it on the counter. He looks at the fisherman, sees him entirely. Liver, left lung, gray manna at the mid-level. He hasn't slept for 3 nights from the journey. Tired, afraid, hopeful. Do Hwan returns to the stove, takes out the fish, ginger, salt, paste, cooks, 20 minutes. A bowl, clay, small. That very one, the first, the one he placed before the old woman Kim 730 days ago. Thousands of bowls have passed through his hands, but each one is the first, for the one who eats it. He places the bowl in front of the fisherman. The fisherman takes a spoon, the first spoonful. His eyes close, his shoulders slump, his breathing slows. Warmth. Do Hwan stands at the stove, with Rin by his side. The knife taps against the cutting board, a steady rhythm. Outside the window, the sea, the sun. Phado, a city that lives because once a man climbed its hill with a sack of spices and smelled the salt. There's a line outside the door, 30 people. There will be more tomorrow, and the day after, and in a year, and in 10. Do Hwan doesn't want to be king. He doesn't want to join the Heroes Guild. He doesn't want a statue in the Hall of Fame. He wants to stand here, at this stove, with this knife, with this woman by his side, and to serve, one by one, personally. As long as there's enough fish and salt and hands, he's a cook, and he's in his place.